Welcome in to DNVR's coverage of the MLB Draft of 2020, Day 2. I am your host, Drew Creasman. With me is DNVR Rockies beat writer Patrick Lyons. And there is much to discuss as the Colorado Rockies have selected a couple of pitchers since the last time we spoke. There was a lot to talk about still left on the table from day one. I feel like I'm still in recovery from what was an extraordinary night. Patrick, how are you on this fine day, day 2 of the draft?
I'm doing well. I'm doing really well, and I think Colorado's doing well also because although the Rockies, didn't have the first overall pick, they've had a lot of success in the first round. Of the 14 players that they've selected with the 10th pick or higher, only 4 have reached the majors, or rather, only 4 have never reached the majors. But in that group that has are some names you're going to know pretty well, like John Gray, Troy Tulowitzki, Todd Helton, Kyle Freeland, Jeff Francis, David Dahl. And yesterday, with the addition of the 9th overall selection, Zach Veen, they hope that they've got one more future Colorado Rockies in their midst.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other bit of news before we get into talking about Chris McMahon and it's Sam Weatherly. I almost called him Seth. Don't do that. We got to get the names correct here. We're going to be talking about those guys in just a minute. We're going to have somebody who knows a little bit about pitching along to do so. I wanted to discuss the number 35 pick a little bit more. We got a chance today to talk to him, Patrick, and we'll have that audio for you here in a little while. The questions we were able to ask Drew Romo. Today, I thought he was extraordinary in his press conference. I thought, he came off as a very present, a very conscious young man, very mindful, was articulate, all of the things you want to see out of a guy who's going to be playing a position where actually communicating and being engaging is an important part of his job. And I will say, I have only grown on this guy since the moment his name was called.
Yeah, as little as the teams know about some of these players, they do know a decent amount, as we heard Zach Wilson talk about yesterday, the fact that they've been following so many of these players for a few years now. For the college players, they've known them since they've been in high school. Drew Romo, of course, has been on their radar for some time now as a guy who's played with some of the 18U national teams. And as you said, we are learning a little bit more about him, and the more we learn, the more we definitely like. On that interview, he talked about his transition from a middle infielder to becoming a catcher on the age of 12 or 13. And from the sounds of it, everything that he said was as if his entire life has been gearing up for this moment, much like a lot of players, but ultimately that he wanted this badly enough that his family ended up moving to play with a coach in the Woodlands area, of course, of Texas. Again, the position change, understanding the fact that, being a switch hitting catcher is going to give you a very quick path to the majors because it's just a position where there's not as much depth as there is in a lot of other positions. So he's a bit wise beyond his years, and I would agree totally that the more we learn about Drew Romo, the more this pick seems to be, a home run, to use a phrase.
to use a baseball phrase, indeed. And it sounds like we've got that audio ready to go. So why don't we go ahead and take a listen in to the 35th overall pick. Drew here from DNVR, and it's rare that a team will take two players that know each other with their top 2 picks, but I know that you've gotten to spend time on the field with Zach Veen. Just wondering about those experiences and what you're maybe looking forward to as you guys kind of work your way up the ranks together.
Yeah, I met Zach Veen last summer. We played at a few different events together, both All-American games, Perfect Game, and Under Armour, and we played a little select ball together. He's a great guy. He's a great competitor. He's a really smart kid. He's a good guy too. I love playing with him, and I look forward to playing with him. I look forward to playing with him for a long time as well.
And then my only other question for you here is, I know you take a great deal of pride in defensive catching. I think when people think about that, they think about blocked in, throwing guys out, framing the ball. But there's a big element you talk about, working with pitchers, working on a game plan. And I was hoping you could share with us a little bit your process in that and how important a part of your game you think those elements are.
Yeah, that's a really important part of the game, especially for catchers. Not only defense, but just being the leader of the team, being the captain. You really do have a big influence over the game behind the plate. And I try my best to help out my pitchers. I always make sure I get to know the guy. I always make sure we have a game plan heading into it. I do my best to know what pitches he likes to throw in certain situations. You know, the more I know about my pitcher, the more confidence I have going into the game and executing in a big situation.
Thank you, Nick Patrick, Lyons, DNVR. Drew, I know, I think it was around age 13 where you converted from an infielder to become a catcher. What went into that decision in going behind the plate?
Yeah, like I said earlier, there just wasn't. There's not a lot of catchers. Not a lot of people want to play catcher. Not a lot of people want to go through that grind. And so as I was growing up, I played a lot of infield, a lot of shortstop, and I tried out catching, and it came natural to me. I made a really good transition, and I felt really good behind the plate, and so I've played there ever since.
And so there you have it from Drew Romo. Really good stuff. I thought answering both of our questions. And the other thing I wanted to mention, Patrick, when I got home and I saw you'd already sent me this article from Perfect Game, and we've been hearing Gold Glove upside, and this guy could be a professional catcher already. And you sent me this piece where these guys who do an extraordinary job of scouting the amateur baseball players in the country dubbed him the best defender of any position of any age that they had the chance to get their eyes on. And so, like I said, I'm just getting more and more into this pick.
Absolutely. It's great if you have a fantastic defensive shortstop, but that is a position where, you do need to have some bat, to stick there. And anywhere else on the diamond, it's important to have great defensive abilities. But behind the plate, maybe the top one, right? And what comes with that hard work that Romo talked about is that ability to work with pitchers and calling a game and understanding that. And he's a bright kid that's going to be able to do all those things. And yeah, it's important that he has a bat, right? It's important that he's at least able to hit in the around 250 or maybe even lower. He's a switch hitter. Eventually, he may just stick with one side because, again, like we talked with two-way players, you can't really do two things at once. You really need to devote yourself entirely to one position. You may need to devote yourself entirely to one side of the plate. I think the one thing Colorado does well with the players that they draft is they give them an opportunity to play the position that they want to play and see how long they can stick it out. They did that with Dom Nunez when they drafted him out of Elk Grove High School in California and said, okay, you want to be a middle infielder? Then let's do that. So you probably even saw him yourself, Drew.
I did. I watched Dom Nunez play second base and hit a $190 as a 17-year-old in Grand Junction.
Yeah, and so you give him that chance, right? And says, okay, we tried it your way. Now let's do it our way. You are going to go back, behind the plate and catch, and the rest is history from there. He goes on and has an amazing debut with the Rockies in September. Exactly. So that'll be the case for Drew. They'll give him a chance to hit on both sides of the plate, and if it doesn't work out, then yeah, he'll stick with one way or another. But again, a switch hitting catcher who has the best defensive skills of any amateur player, including college level players. Wow. Okay. That changes the story a little bit on, quote unquote, a high school player was taken 35th overall. It's a bit different right now.
Yeah, and I honestly don't know if John here means that Romo is Walters 2.0 as a compliment or as a put down, but I take it as an extraordinary compliment. If he's going to be that level of defender at the big leagues and be so before too long. And by the way, we'll be hearing from Dom Nunez before too long. We're going to be talking to him. We're going to have Tracy Ringolsby along before too long here. Mark Knudsen should be on his way into talk. I'm not going to talk. He's going to talk pitching with us. But yeah, this Romo pick, man. And the other thing I wanted to say was, when I saw that the batting average had been, 245, 250, that's obviously not something that you get super excited about. But the power in that swing, and I get that, the video I've looked at is him taking BP. So if you know what pitch is coming and you're not totally fooled, your swing's going to look pretty. Not everyone's does, but his swing is really smooth. If this kid can learn how to read the ball out of the hand at all, if he can recognize, the spin and lay off of the stuff out of the zone, the naturalness of his swing, the mechanics and the power are there for him to develop into a really scary baseball player.
You can't entirely pick it up on the videos. You look at him and go, yeah, maybe he's about Tony Walters' height. Obviously a little bit lankier. He's younger, doesn't quite pack on the pounds or have the muscle that Tony Walters does. But he is 6'1", so he's got a good size there for a backstop. And yeah, a lot of the scouts are looking at him, and for a catcher and for a high school player, they have said to a man that he is one of the most likely future major leaguers that we're going to see. And now if he becomes a career backup, that obviously will be a disappointment. But kind of as we hashed yesterday, the likelihood of guys becoming an actual major leaguer is incredibly difficult, right? Only about 123, exactly 123, but about 12% of players that the Rockies draft and sign even make it to the majors. So it's an incredibly hard route, and here we are seeing him, one of the perfect game combines. I think this is at Chase Field. One of the
Oh, I love these. Look at how quick he gets rid of the ball. Look at the accuracy on these throws.
And this is a part of the summer circuit. We're hoping to have a guest on today that can talk a little bit about what players do in the summertime, because for high school players, their season is going to be done at some point in June, whether you're on the West Coast or East Coast. College players, same thing. Their season's done. Now what do you do until you go back to school in the fall? Here's one of the things you do, especially if you're a high school player. You go to Perfect Game and do one of the showcase circuits that they have out there.
Yeah, the swing from the right side is a little bit more herky-jerky. I think you're right. I think he's going to have to probably stick to the left. But those and John clarified, by the way, that he did mean it as a compliment, and rightfully so. But that's Tony Walters' quickness getting rid of the ball. But as we've mentioned many times before, Walters doesn't have the strongest arm to back. That's a stronger arm right there. What you were just seeing is a quicker. That's a better arm to throw people out at second base than the stash that you do not dash on. Already, this kid at 18 years old has got that arm. And we can continue to talk about Romo, but here's the other thing: as we continue on our draft coverage presented by MSU Denver, I want to get into the next pick, but that they got Chris McMahon, the righty, out of Miami, still at 46, who was somebody. I think if you flipped these. If they had taken McMahon last night at 35, we'd have been going, good, great, okay, good. They did what they needed to do with their second pick. They got a solid college arm who should be good in the big leagues, maybe doesn't have elite stuff. They got him, and now they can go about the pitching thing. That they were still able to get him at 46, I think makes the Drew Romo pick that much more palatable.
Yeah, credit to them, absolutely, to be able to do that, because you go the other way, maybe Romo's not available. That's the other thing. There's so much intel that goes on, and in a normal year, what ends up happening is, you'll go to some of these summer showcase games or tournaments, whatever it may be, and you start to see some recognizable faces in the industry, and you say, all right, well, this team is in on this player, and this team really likes that player, and it's who you're going to be doing business with, and you don't have a certain flexibility. But here there's some uncertainty, but maybe the Rockies did have some information and some insider knowledge that a team behind them was going to make that move and pull that trigger. But as it were, they're able to get both the guys that they like so much here, and more importantly, at least right now, more importantly, they got Chris McMahon. In the future, it may be more importantly they got perennial all-star catcher Drew Romo.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see which one of those it ends up being. But I'll tell you what, when I woke up this morning and I took a look at our big board and who was left, my thought was, all right, the best the Rockies can hope for with this 46th pick is probably Chris McMahon. I think that's the guy they want. And when I ended up writing the article, one of the things I mentioned was, we were in some ways hoping for, or at least sort of resigned to accepting as a good thing, Reed Detmers at number 9. And you look at the profiles of McMahon and Detmers, and they're pretty similar. Now, Detmers is a lefty, and he's got a little bit better of a track record, where Chris McMahon has been a little bit more of a late bloomer. He's really added weight. He was, from my understanding, just a beanpole a couple of years ago and has added the velocity. So there's less of a track record there. But essentially, we've got a guy here with a mid-90s fastball, an above-average changeup, cutter / slider that scouts say is developing, and that has the possibility to be plus. So 3+ pitches. And the downside is that same thing we said about Reed Detmers, mid-rotation ceiling. At 46, that feels fine. See Toma 24 saying steal of the draft. Might be.
Yeah, he had a really good spring, before obviously it got cut short like everyone's season, but had 4 starts, 25 and 2/3 innings, 1.05 ERA, 38 strikeouts to 5 walks. So by my count, that's 8-1. Again, don't know who's on their schedule early in the season. It could be teams, from the Midwest coming down. From games outside of the ACC here, we see against Towson coming just outside of the Baltimore area, and it's filthy stuff. And one of the perks, I guess, of this year's draft is you don't have to worry about shutting a guy down like you would with a Carl Kaufman. You're getting a guy who's nice and clean there. You see the hook there, getting the batter looking on the right-hand side.
There's a changeup, getting a lefty to swing through a changeup on the inside. That changeup, that's going to be a great equalizer. And you've talked about this, Patrick, at Coors Field. I didn't know he had that hook. The scouting report that maybe the slider slurve he's worked on was mostly about his fastball changeup. That pitch right there, unless that was still the changeup, in which case, welcome to Coors Field in 2 years.
He's got some attitude, and the photograph that we ended up using for that piece that you wrote, fantastic job, by the way. You can see that passion that he's got. He's pumped up. Wearing the number 7 could be the first starting pitcher in Rockies history to wear a single digit. To my knowledge, Adam Ottavino would be the only other pitcher that has worn a single digit, which it's
zero's its own. Yeah.
If we can make our own avenue for McMahon, if he wants to have a single digit there, that would be pretty interesting. That's very rare that you see that. So we'll see. Maybe he'll be rocking 7. Maybe he'll be rocking 77.
Look at this novel that John just wrote us. I got to say, John is a long time. He is a DNVR supporter through
his avatar is dressed better than both of us combined. What
I know,
man.
I know. But he's right. He's saying I got to give Bridich credit. Zach Veen fell. He snatched him up, then followed up by addressing a long-standing need. And by long-standing, John means 25 years in grabbing Romo. A couple of high schoolers, which means now you're looking toward the future, bolster a playoff contender the next couple of years. You look to grab a bunch of college players hoping to be competitive in the near future and failing at that. So the high schoolers offer you more time and opportunity for development. I think there's going to be more to that. We'll read the rest of John's novel as soon as he's run it through the publisher clearinghouse.
And now keep that in mind. And this is for everybody here. Keep that in mind, your excitement that you have today, right? Everyone, Veen, just getting excited for Zach Veen. Maybe not excited for Romo. Now we're talking him up a bit, and I think you're beginning to say, wow, okay, I think the Rockies made a nice pick. Hey, they still got an arm at 46. I'm excited about this class. Remember that. Because in a few years' time, you're going to see guys that were still on the board when the Rockies took Veen. And you're going to go, how do you let Garrett Mitchell slip to 20? How does that happen? How do you not take a great high school shortstop named Ed Howard, who, man, Todd Frazier, starting shortstop, Little League World Series, Ed Howard doing it for Jackie Robinson West. Oh, man, all these similarities. But you went with the high school kid? Oh, man, how could you do that? You made a mistake. Remember that today when you think, I really like these picks. I think they're doing a good job. That's the difficulty with not only evaluating talent, but that's the difficulty with developing talent on a minor league level, because this is only one of the stages in that process, and so much can happen between now and then. So much that's ultimately, can be out of the control of the player and or the team. Things like that happen, and you hope that there's not going to be this really dramatic story and this tale that so many prospects have learned from. Of course, I'm thinking of Brian Taylor, who I think he was the first pick that in 1992 by the Yankees. Big prospect, lefty, fantastic, and then one off season gets in a fight lacerations on his hand, and his career's over. This huge prospect that everybody in the Bronx, everybody on the East Coast is getting pumped up for. And just like that, never makes a debut. The Yankees never get any kind of compensation for their first round pick that year. And when you go back and look at overall what they did, you go, oh man, the Yankees really should have drafted better. Things are out of players, teams' control, and sometimes it is a little bit of the luck of the draw. So remember that when you want to give Jeff Bridich or the Rockies some crap. When right now you're feeling good about their first 3 picks.
Yeah, I think that's all worth mentioning. And as we've talked about, some of this has fallen to them. It sounds like we've got to look at how the entire second round has played out so far. And one of the things I think this is going to remind us about is a word we've not used yet on today's show, Patrick, and that is signability. Some of these guys that we're seeing fall here, Jared Kelly, who was higher on our board but taken immediately after Chris McMahon. I don't think Jared Kelly signs with the Rockies at 46. There's a 5% chance that happens. Where McMahon, I think, is going to be in there. So as we take a look at the board, those are just the kinds of things that we'll continue to note as we go on throughout here.
Yeah, we'll have to get back to that point about Jared Kelly, because that is a real good one as far as what you can do with some of these high school players who have options to turn around and go to college. They've already committed to some big schools. Jared Kelly was committed to go to school down in Austin at the University of Texas. So you don't meet his asking price, he can go to college there and come back in a couple years and probably get taken within the first 10 picks and make twice as much money. So no skin off his back.
Yeah. Well, we've got to talk to somebody who was taken out of high school and who did stick with the team that drafted him, the Colorado Rockies. We were discussing them a little bit earlier, and we had talked to Zach Wilson yesterday. Played that first year, middle infield. You know him now as a catcher in this system. You saw him make his major league debut last year and smash one that hasn't landed yet in that game. Dom Nunez, thanks for joining us, man.
What's up, guys? How's it going?
It's going really well. We're having fun. We're celebrating baseball. It's the draft. It's a day that brings a lot of fun memories for a lot of people. Can you tell us your memories of getting the call?
Yeah, no, it was definitely probably the second best day of my life now, that making my debut and all of that fun stuff. But yeah, I was at home for the first day. I wasn't sure if I was going to go on the first day, and I didn't go. And then I went out to my high school, and I was actually just practicing, working out with a couple of buddies, and had my phone on me just in case I got the call. And sure enough, I got the call from our area scout here. And he actually said around the third round that they weren't going to take me. And then I think like a few minutes later, they called around the 5th round and said they were going to take me probably with their 6th round pick. And sure enough, they drafted me, and here we are now.
Yeah, of course, middle infielder at Elk Grove High School. Eventually you did transition to catcher. What is that conversation like as a first year pro of saying, hey, I really want to try to make a go of it as a middle infielder? Rockies maybe see you more as a future catcher. How does that conversation go down between a young prospect like yourself and a team where you might want to go one way and the team maybe wants you to go another?
I think it wasn't really me wanting to go one way, them the other. It was more my comfort level coming out of high school. I didn't really have any experience behind the plate other than maybe like 10 games under my belt. And so they knew I played infield pretty much my whole life. So I went out that first year, played infield. And then after that, we had, quite a bit of talks about making the transition behind the plate, and went to a couple of instructional leagues and made that transition, and then went to, extended spring training and repeated that year, which was good for my process. And then after that, just kind of, just learned every single game, just pretty much right on the job. The best way of learning is by playing. And Obviously, there was a lot of hurdles throughout the way, but um, I loved learning in pro ball because I think that's the best way to learn is at the highest level of competition.
Yeah, how did that process go for you of becoming comfortable being a catcher, starting to take on the roles of doing all the other things that catchers have to do that I think that the average fan may not think about on a day-to-day basis. You got to study the other team's lineup, come up with a game plan, work with your pitcher, and if you've got time to get in the cages, so there's just a lot on your plate. When did you start to feel like not no one ever starts to feel like they're getting the hang of the game of baseball. I know
Yeah,
that, but like, yeah, okay, I'm in my comfort zone a little bit here.
I think one of my big attributes as a player is just being a baseball player and the knowledge of the game. I feel like I have a pretty good IQ of the game of baseball from a young age. So I think they saw that in me as well before I was drafted, and I think they seen that I could handle it, and it wasn't overwhelming. I never felt overwhelmed. Had a lot of help from coaches and coordinators and front office people, stuff like that throughout the way, and obviously players. They helped a lot from a lot of guys coming through the system. So yeah, I mean, just being a baseball player, being a middle infielder, just always having to be in the middle of action and know where everyone's going helped me transition behind the plate. And yeah, throughout the process of the minor leagues, you learn a lot and learn how to handle different situations and all that information. And then once you get to the big league level, it's a whole nother animal. As I learned this year.
I do want to ask you about that, and I got to jump in, Patrick, cut you off, and you may be ready to ask the exact same question because we talked about this so much with catchers coming up to this, and since they've taken this Drew Romo kid, a name we've talked about, and we got to get your insight on this guy. You were going there, Mark Strittmatter. Can you tell us about working with him?
Yeah, he's probably the best in the business. Honestly, when I say I learned in pro ball, I probably learned 80% of the physical part of catching from Stritty. The other 20 or so, I would say, just from other players, such as probably Tony the most, just because I was with him and our backgrounds are very similar, being infielders and stuff like that. But yeah, I think the biggest thing that I can credit to Stritty was he was just patient, never negative, and um, he let me be myself behind the plate. He didn't try and change me into somebody that I wasn't. He wanted me to stay athletic as possible and honestly just be a middle infielder behind the plate. I think that's why I've had so much success is just I try and use my hands, and as everybody knows now, that's the analytics of the game is framing. So I feel like that's this early success in my career, I would say, is just from being a middle infielder and not taking away that athletic ability.
Early in your career, Tony Walters, Chris Iannetta, guys like that, when you get down to spring training in Scottsdale, they've been able to help, your trajectory of your career and provide a lot of, guidance and words of wisdom. Drew Romo, high school kid, taken out of the Woodlands, Texas. What's one piece of advice you might give to him as he makes his first foray into professional baseball?
Like I said, just to be patient. If he ever hears this, I mean, I would say just be patient, but I'm sure I'll meet him here pretty soon, hopefully, because it's going to be a grind. It's going to be a lot at times on your plate, but I think, just follow around guys like Tony and obviously Stritty's still with us. So just be in his back pocket because that's really what it took for me to transition into a catcher. Obviously, this kid is a catcher, and I think he played middle infield as well, from what I've heard a little bit. So that's good. And honestly, keep taking ground balls because it's going to help your footwork. It's going to help your hands. Just keeping that athletic ability behind the plate is going to help a lot. And, just have fun with it throughout this process. There's going to be a lot of downs, especially catching, because no matter what, you can't slip up on the defensive end, but your bat is just really a plus. So yeah, just have fun with it and, enjoy the process of getting to the big leagues.
He did mention being a big yoga guy. Are you a big yoga guy? And I know Tony's big into even like the All the yoga, the mental yoga, the whole thing. How are you at on all that stuff?
Yeah, Tony's definitely into that stuff a lot. I was with him last week, working out a little bit, and he likes that. I haven't got into it, to be honest with you. I like lifting. I like doing that side of things, and I would say just when I lift and my daily routine at the gym is a lot of mobility stuff like that. So no, I'm not a huge yoga guy. I've done it a handful of times, but that's about it.
Well, you got the pop. We saw you hit one in spring training that I don't think has landed yet. We'll hopefully see another spring training again soon. And I did want to I know I've asked you this before, but I want to get you out of here on the other memory. We asked you about the best memory, or the second best. We got to let you talk about the first, making your major league debut and hitting a home run and your family getting to be there, the whole ordeal.
Yeah, no doubt. Make my debut at Coors Field was unbelievable. I was welcomed open arms, and obviously I had been around quite a bit and throughout spring trainings and stuff like that with the players. So, I was very familiar with the guys, familiar with the staff and stuff, and getting to Coors Field and how they welcomed my family was unbelievable. I'm very thankful for that, and obviously playing the game was very surreal at the time. Having those first few at bats under my belt and then kind of settling in. I settled in pretty quickly. I felt like I got pretty comfortable. And then, my fourth at bat, the home run for my first hit was awesome, rounding the bases. Definitely didn't really feel my legs around the bases, and until I really hit home plate and realized Hampson was on deck, and you can just like see a familiar face, and it's like, I did it. I did what I always wanted to do, was, homer in a big league game, and it happened to be my debut and my first hit, so it was even a little bit more special. And then coming in the dugout and, being greeted by all the other players and my teammates and stuff like that was awesome. So I think, they made it a very special day for me, and obviously hopefully, we got the win. We didn't get the win, but they made it a very special day for me, because you only get that one opportunity.
Where's that baseball at now? Where have you got it?
It's just in my room right now. Hopefully in the future of getting my own house and stuff like that, I'll have a separate room for a lot of memorabilia. I like, collecting a lot of teammates that I play with, to be honest with you, that play in the big leagues. Not only, big name guys, but a lot of guys that I come up with, because being in the minor leagues for as long as I was, you really learn, about how important your teammates are, and how honestly everybody's in it for the same reason. We're all grinding together, and when somebody makes it and actually has a lot of success, those are the guys that I want their stuff, because you were with them in the trenches together. So then when they come over to your house or whatever, hopefully in 10, 15 years, they're like, dang, dude, you have my stuff on the wall or whatever, I just think it's special, because they were special people in my life that have always helped me, and I hope I helped them throughout the years.
Like when a guy goes out and places fourth in Cy Young voting or something like that, for example. One of your buddies does something like that.
Yeah. No, yeah, I got his bat, because I think he rakes. So him and Marquez, I got them signing bats.
Nice.
Who's a guy you'd like to highlight, as you said that there are grinders out with you in the minors? Who's somebody you'd like to highlight, or a piece of memorabilia you'd highlight that we might not know that name, or fans out there might not recognize?
That have been in the big leagues, that reached the big leagues this year?
Guys who haven't.
Or anybody?
Yeah, guys who haven't really.
So one of the guys for sure that reached the big leagues is a familiar name now, is Josh Fuentes. His story probably hits the most, being a NAIA guy and undrafted free agent, and, cousin of obviously Nolan. He's doing big things and very special things. And then, guys like Matt Pierpont, who I've roomed with for multiple years, Peter Lambert, obviously a prospect, big leaguer who I'm really close with. And Forrest Wall, I was really close with before he got traded over to Toronto. So yeah, there's a lot of guys throughout the whole process, from Grand Junction to AAA and Albuquerque. You just meet a lot of different guys, and I mean, it's been an amazing journey, and I'm excited that hopefully it's just a start.
Dom, thank you so much for taking the
Thank
time.
you,
We
man.
took a little extra of your time. We were
It's all
just so
good.
interested in that last bit.
Yeah,
It was-
no, you're good.
it's good stuff. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you back out there on the ball field very, very soon.
All right, guys, take care.
Take
Take it easy,
care.
Dom. Good stuff.
How awesome is that? Yeah, you got
Love
to.
it.
Those are the kinds of things that you got to know about. You know, he's collecting. He's got some Josh Fuentes memorabilia, and he's like those are the guys. It's a perfect name to talk about on a day like today, man.
Yeah.
A guy that did not get drafted back when there were 40 rounds of this thing, and he's a big leaguer, and he showed up at spring training looking like he was gonna earn a roster spot, and also with a better beard than his cousin can grow. Fuentes looked ready to ball out, man. So it's yeah, Dom makes a fantastic point. He knows it took him 6 years, 6.5 years between getting drafted and making his major league debut. And like you said, he's hoping it's just the start. He's really that was still kind of at the end of the year when the Rockies had dropped off a little bit. He's really still looking for his first chance to be an impact player 7 years into his professional career.
Yes, so many of the guys, there's so many steps to just being a regular. Like exactly
Be patient,
as you
he
said.
said. Be patient.
Hey, you make your debut, and it's like, okay, now I really want to contribute, for much longer. And then after you contribute, hey, I really want to stick around, and there's so many stages and steps to it. And you're right, it's interesting with Josh Fuentes. We've now had 4 players. I think my count is right. 4 active Colorado Rockies players come on our draft day live show, and to each man we say, take us back. What are your memories of hearing your name or seeing your name? And we wouldn't have been able to do that with Josh Fuentes because it didn't happen. He was signed as a free agent and may have gotten similar money to what guys now after the 5th round will get. So ultimately, you could be 6th round talent and get $20,000. Meanwhile, in Josh Fuentes' day, 1,200 players were selected before him, didn't hear his name, got a tryout, impressed, and he had to grind it out too. And it's amazing. I love that Dom has memorabilia of guys that aren't huge stars yet.
I love that. I do too.
Because it just shows, like, again, it's a reminder every day of the guys that went through the trenches with you and the ones that weren't able to do it. What is that factor that separates a guy who, coming out of high school is one of the best prep players that all scouts from all 30 teams would go, this dude is a stud, and then never makes his debut? What's the difference between that guy and someone who goes in the 15th round like Sam Hilliard?
Right.
Yeah, maybe an extra 5 inches could be the difference. But you go, why can this guy do it and this guy can't? And that's what makes the game so beautiful and can also equally make it just as painful.
Yeah, exactly right. That it cuts very deeply both ways. But I love that. There were a lot of great quotes from that you don't have to put in context. They were totally great out of context. But my one that you needed to have in context that I just loved was, I got his bat. It's my
Yeah.
I loved it. I just want you to know, I got his bat.
Mentioned Freeland before Marquez. So that's something we're going to have to keep our eye on, Freeland, of course, he's got some things to work on up on the mound, and I think he's going to get it back together. But I think Freeland's saying, all right, keep your eye on Herman, but I'm the next guy to win a Silver Slugger. Mike Hampton, Herman Marquez, and maybe Kyle Freeland.
Yeah, maybe. Well, we do want to talk a little bit now about the other pitchers, and we can talk more about Christmas Man. They got him for Christmas because he was there at 46. Sam Weatherly, the 6'3" lefty that the Colorado Rockies have taken here. He put up pretty decent numbers, but is probably potentially a reliever. It depends on how you look at him. But he's got a fastball that touches up to 96 and a slider that scouts have put a 60 grade on. So from the left side, a 96 mile an hour fastball is a rarity, and a solid slider for a guy that you're going to get. a little bit later. I don't know that I'm in love with this pick, Patrick, but I don't know that there was anything they were going to do here that was going to send me
That's right.
over the moon.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, there are less and less options that are available, of course, but you get a lefty, right? You thought you were going to have one in Reed Detmers. Instead, you get a different, a lefty out of the SEC pitching out of Clemson. Was drafted out of high school, so, he's always kind of had that pedigree right there. Was the Friday night starter in Clemson. These teams all around the country, they come to town for a 4-game set, 3-4-game set, and Friday night. Those are the Friday night lights of college baseball. That's your number one starter. Each and every Friday, your best pitcher is going to go out, take the ball, and Sam Weatherly was that guy for the Tigers. So, Clemson doing it on the football field, baseball field. They're haven't had quite as much luck recently, but that is a historically been a really good school for baseball, and you got to hope that Weatherly is again one of those guys who can contribute to the major league club over the course of the time he develops. He's just over 21 years old. Had his birthday not too long ago, so he's still relatively young. And and again, being a left-handed starter, or really just a left-handed pitcher, if there's a 2020 season and Ben Bowden is not able to get his stuff together, I know he's rehabbing a little bit. Philip Deal, maybe he's the number one lefty out of the pen. Jake McGee, we know he's kind of has reverse splits getting out right-handers, but shoot, maybe the name Sam Weatherly is a name we end up hearing in September in Game 49, the most important game of the season.
The most important
Game
one.
49, as it were.
Yeah.
But maybe that's the case, and again, that's one of the things you can dream on that is unique to this season and this season alone, because otherwise you wouldn't see Sam Weatherly, in a Rockies uniform for a couple years, but it could possibly happen this year.
Right. Yeah, he got to get them walks under control. I'm looking through these now. He's got a 5.56 walk per 9 rate last year, and that was his career best. And I was looking at that video there, and I see why. You see what's going on. Like the ball's flying out of his hand with reckless abandon, and so maybe he's doing too much to reach 96 because the movement on the slider we just saw, like, dude, like throw it 93, 94 with your fastball. You got that wipeout slider. If and I never like the idea of drafting a guy to try to change him. And but here clearly you've got to get those walks under control. You have to develop that. You can't be like, well, he is who he is. Sometimes he just misses the zone by 12 feet. Like, no, you've got to get that. 5.56 will not play at Coors Field. It just won't.
Right, yeah, and even if he does dial it back a little bit, that could reduce the amount of swing and miss he gets on his fastball and slider. The changeup is a distant third pitch, so if that's the difference between a reliever and a starter is the development and command of at least a third pitch. And right now he doesn't have that. If he's able to develop it, then he could stick around as a starter and possibly even start a game, if you will. But if not, he's going to have to move to the bullpen. Harrison Musgrave is one of those guys where he started all throughout, his development in the minors, and then when he comes to the Rockies, it's okay. We're going to be bringing you in 5th, 6th, 7th, and that's going to now be your role going forward. And you can never go back to that. We'll give you an opportunity to start, and Weatherly will have that. But at a certain point, you got to cut your losses and say, you know what? We're gonna develop you as reliever, and go ahead and shove with your fastball, slider, and hopefully you're right. He can figure those two pitches out so he throws for strikes a bit more.
Yeah, there was somebody who was asking earlier. I think it was our guy Dan, whether or not, and we've got the full, I think, updated board, so we can throw that up while I'm talking about this, but. He was saying, is the first day really an indication that the Rockies they're not trying to win this year? They're kind of punting on 2021 even, and they're really just building toward the future. And I myself had preceded that idea in people's minds that if they take a couple of high schoolers, that's a strong indication that they don't think they're ready to compete right away. But I I don't think these two specific high schoolers happen to fit that. If they had taken high school pitchers at 9 and 35, I'd be there with you, as it's an indication that they're not trying to build for right now. As it is, and especially now that we've seen the McMahon and Weatherly picks come in, and we've talked about this a lot, that it doesn't, like, your top two picks aren't necessarily going to get to the big leagues faster. And there are going to be guys who are taken, in other rounds. Obviously, we don't have a ninth round this year, but who might never get to the bigs, and a guy taken in the 15th who might be Sam Hilliard or Scott Oberg. But I think the thing here, now that we've seen these two pitchers and the way you've played it out, that both are high floor, sort of polished guys, though the walk issue with, but closer to the big leagues, could even be potentially rushed there. I don't know that we've gotten an indication that the Rockies are doing anything other than what Thomas Harding said at the beginning of our 4.5 hours yesterday, which is they're just going to take whoever they think is the absolute best player available, regardless of position, time, level. And that's not a terrible draft philosophy to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if certain guys are going to stand out and you're going to say, hey, this guy reminds me a lot of so-and-so. We just can't afford to let this guy slip. And I think we're going to get some good value out of this player. It's hard to know if a guy at this point, being selected after, 100 other guys is going to, be a contributing, member of a major league club, let alone an all-star, right? Yeah. But you say, hey, we think this guy could be a utility infielder for us, or he might be able to move through the minors, right? He doesn't have a very high ceiling, but we think he could move through the minors very quickly. Or, you know what, his makeup, and this probably happens more possibly in a 40-round draft, is you say, well, this guy's makeup plays really well in some of our ballparks, so you know what? We'll draft him, and we know we're probably not going to end up keeping him, but he's got enough, sexy tools, quote unquote, that okay, we're eventually going to use him as a trade chip. So we'll take him because we think we can get more value in general from this guy in this spot than anybody else. So you might not even be taking him necessarily as the player. It's just what his value could be for you in a trade or based upon the depth charts that you might have in your system.
Right. Well, one of the things we were talking about at the end of our show last night, Patrick, that I wanted to do more in depth here today, now that we've got a little time and space, is take a look around the NL West, both in terms of what's gone on in this draft and how the farm systems are shaking out for each of these teams. We've heard over and over again the Rockies have a relatively weak farm system. Some of these other teams are supposed to have much stronger farm systems. Just off the top of your mind, is there any? Let's do the worst. Who's had the worst draft so far of the teams in the NL West?
I like what the Dodgers have done so far. They've grabbed a couple good arms. The Padres have been questionable in a sense, drafting so many high schoolers, but I think they were able to grab Cole Wilcox there with their third pick, so that really kind of changes, what they've done. The Diamondbacks, of course, with two starting pitchers yesterday. I don't know if they've reached for Bryce Jarvis, whose dad actually pitched for the Diamondbacks. I think they did a good job. So that being said, that only leaves one team. That's the San Francisco Giants, who, as we are going to see in just a moment, when we look at their top prospects, several are in the top 100. Their top prospect is not only just the best in their system, he's the 14th best in the game. To my knowledge, I think he's actually, Adley Rutschman, I think, is just ahead of him, but essentially the second best catcher of all minor leaguers. And that's
a 1A, 1B situation.
For sure. And then they go out and they say, hey, we're going to take the best college catcher. And it just doesn't make sense.
No. It doesn't make a lick of sense. The San Francisco Giants have done a number of strange things in the last couple of years, but this is weirder than thinking Evan Longoria and Andrew McCutchen are going to save you when those guys no longer have knees.
Yeah, for sure. They were able to, after Bailey, grab Casey Schmidt out of San Diego State, a third baseman. Might have been a bit of a reach there. Obviously, they like what they see. Nick Swinney out of North Carolina State was one of those guys where you hope, hey, maybe he could be a number 3, number 4 starter for you. I've heard some good things about. So, after that first pick, they kind of get their legs, underneath them. But ultimately, that's so confusing to have such a specialized position like catcher. You could have your best prospect could be a shortstop, right? I mean, we could use Brendan Rodgers as an example. Even if Trevor Story moves on, Ken Rodgers, stick at shortstop for the Rockies in the majors. You could give him that chance, right? Well, you go out and you draft a young high school player like Ed Howard. You go, well, one of them is going to eventually have to move. Well, Howard's, 18 years old. By the time he reaches the majors, maybe Rodgers has moved over to third base. You don't know what's going to happen to Arenado. Rodgers can already play a great second base. Maybe Howard ends up moving to the outfield. You're selecting athletic players who can move around the diamond. Catchers, while they can move, are catchers.
They catch.
And to take 2 of them in 3 years just is a little bit confounding.
And what if, and of course I'm going to say this, but what if Drew Romo is better than Patrick Bailey? That wouldn't be like the most shocking thing that's ever happened in the world for a guy who was taken 35th to be a little bit better than the guy who was taken 16th in the draft.
Personally, I think Patrick is better than Drew. Now,
Okay. All right, buddy. Drew,
Wait,
Drews are good. We
Hold
got to
on,
get
what are we
got to
talking
get
about
Romo
here?
together with Goodman from last night. We'll get the 3 of us together. We'll be the 3 Drooges.
Could be. Patrick's are just always better than Drew's. But that's not.
Do you have to be a dad to make dad jokes?
No. Fun fact. That's
no
right.
rule. No
That's
rule.
Right. You're right.
Yeah.
You do bring up a fair point. I think Bailey will obviously reach the majors before a high schooler, playing down the ACC at North Carolina State. So he'll get that chance first. But again, if he's blocked by Joey Bart, or if he has to move and change positions, you go, well, it's little apples and oranges, so to speak. You don't have 2 catchers here you're talking about. One has been converted, and one stuck around as a catcher and is one of the best defensive catchers in the game. And that's what you hope for with Drew Romo.
It's apples and oranges. It's Drews and Patrick's. And I'm with you. I don't love in a vacuum what the Dodgers have done. Like I wasn't in love with either of those pitchers, but they're probably going to be good now, as AJ said last night. You can't really be down, and they really do. I mean, they put the resources into it. They spend the money. The AJ was talking about why the Dodgers system is so good. Or rather, he was just mentioning that the system was so good. And they have poured money into giving these guys video rooms, cages, taking care of their conditioning. I mean, look at these names. And this is after graduating. A lot of people, Rockies fans, know what Gavin Lux did to him already last year. Dustin May, you worry about being, another Walker Buehler on the horizon for these guys who have already produced that type of talent. And you would think, they've got all the money. They're the Dodgers. They go out and buy all their talent. It's like they do that as well. They go out and get the Mookie Betts or make the trades for the Manny Machados. But they've done a really good job of growing their system this way, even when they haven't had the top picks. And so you have to remain scared of the Dodgers system as a Rockies fan. They didn't blow any. As much as I was saying earlier, I don't love these picks, I can't feign to squint and say, ooh, the Dodgers really screwed up the way we're talking about the Giants here.
Oh, no 2 ways about it. Bobby Miller and Clayton Beeter were 2 players I figured the Rockies would maybe target with their second and third pick, and Miller ended up going 29th, so he obviously wasn't there for the competitive balance pick in round A. Beeter was available there, but again, they like McMahon better. As far as what you're saying about developing players, that's 100% right about what the Dodgers have been able to do. use their money wisely in the international free agent market, as we saw one of their players, Keibert Ruiz, was their only international free agent that they signed. Brusdar Graterol, of course, came over in the Kenta Maeda deal in the current offseason that we are still in the trade for Maeda. But the third guy on that list is interesting, Josiah Gray, because he's an example of what the Dodgers' money can do. Because Josiah Gray, along with a second prospect whose name escapes me right now, they basically came over to the Dodgers because the Cincinnati Reds believed that in 2019 they could contend. So they got Yasiel Puig, they got Alex Wood, and they got Matt Kemp. And because those are top major league talent, they decided to trade away a couple guys that they had just drafted. Josiah Gray was one of those players. And actually the other guy was Jeter Downs. Two familiar names, Gray and Jeter. So Jeter Downs was another, again, top prospect that ultimately the Dodgers, they needed to save money. So what they did was they traded those three veteran players I just mentioned. They took Homer Bailey because it would have cost them less. And then they immediately cut Homer Bailey. So what they did was they picked up the phone, they called Cincinnati, and they worked out a deal where the Dodgers could save money, stay under the soft luxury cap that exists in MLB, and still bring back two top prospects. They were able to do that because of their financial flexibility, and that is something that not all teams can deal with, and that is yet another advantage that teams like the LA Dodgers have over the mid to small market clubs.
Absolutely, and it's irritating when they use those resources wisely. It really is. But so the Rockies are just a couple of picks away, and we have got an updated board to take a look at what has gone on so far. Gage Workman fell back quite a bit.
That was a surprise. Yes.
Yeah, quality third baseman that. The Rockies really have no need to draft at that position, but that's an interesting fall.
Yeah, we talked about him yesterday with Kyle Kercheval. Quality third baseman, Jack Moss of Cherry Creek High School. Go ahead, Drew.
I got nothing.
Oh, I thought I was waiting for you to boo.
Cherry Creek High School. I just let it fly right by me. I've tried to become numb to Cherry Creek over the years.
There you go. Kobe Mayo, also another guy that has got a lot of upside too. So still, it's kind of a surprise to think that in the fourth round there could still be some really top quality players. One of the interesting names worth highlighting is number 89, Blaze Jordan. So yesterday, one of the top stories was that Boston, at pick number 17, reached for a guy, Nick York, who by many accounts was a 100th around there prospect. And one of the things we weren't able to get an opportunity to explain yesterday was this bonus pool money, and we said guys going under slot or maybe over slot. And what happens with that is teams are given a pool of money, and each pick is worth a certain dollar amount. You add that up. That's how much money you want to spend. Spend it wisely. You can't spend it all on one guy, though, right? Because if you get $5 million for the first, $3 million, $2 million, that's $10 million. Well, if you punt on your second and third pick, you just lost $3 and $2 million. You lost $5 million. So you only have the $5 million to begin with. So you have to make sure you sign all of your guys. Then you can play with that money. So my estimation is that, again, they took a guy under slot, Nick York, worked out a deal and say, look, you are probably going to get maybe $1 million. We're going to give you $2 million, right? If you accept this, if we take you in the first round, pick number 17, we'll give you $2 million. And now they can go and take that extra money and try to convince a guy like Blaze Jordan to not go to Mississippi State. Blaze Jordan is a guy, he's been on social media a lot. You can watch some YouTube videos of him hit. The word escapes me there. He committed to Mississippi State at 13 years old. Yes.
As you do.
Who's Nick York? Blaze Jordan, you should know. It's the best. It might be the best name of the entire draft.
And we have got a whole conversation to have on that. So I really hope that they take Blaze Jordan, because I have listed my favorite names, and he is right up there at the top. I did want to finish out what you were saying there a little bit. You know, the Rockies taking Veen, who was expected to go 4-5, getting him at 9. Then the Rockies taking Chris McMahon at 46. We had him at 31 on our board. So those are both obviously, above value picks. And then Drew Romo, ironically, we had at 46 on our board, and they took him at 35. So he's the only one you can say, they took him a little ahead of slot, but barely. And, it still does remain to be seen. We should say that Drew Romo did not 100% commit to signing with the Rockies and not going to LSU today when given the opportunity to do so. I mean, he hasn't even had a conversation with the Rockies, and they haven't even made their offer yet, so you don't want to do that. He sounded very positive on being with the Rockies, but just all things to keep in mind as we go throughout here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that signability is just so huge because, as I said, you lose that money. So if Zach Veen says, "Look, I was the best high school hitter in that class," all right, Spencer Torkelson is fantastic. So is Austin Martin, and now I'm the third. I'm the third best hitter. I'm better than Nick Gonzalez. All right, I faced better competition in high school in Florida than he did at New Mexico State. I'm the third best hitter. You need to pay me, fifth pick money. You need to pay me $1 million more than what you have. Well, the only way that the Rockies can do that is if they are able to sign somebody else for $1 million less, or two players $500,000. That's how math works. So you have to have some kind of working agreement with these guys. So maybe that was the case with Drew Romo. We might see him go under slot to make sure that they could sign Zach Veen, which is all a part of it, right? You might be disappointed and say, well, Romo wasn't a name that was really high on a lot of other people's draft boards, and that's disappointing. I want a name that I know. Well, Zach Veen's a name you know. In order to actually sign him, you may need to pay him a bit more, which means you need to pay somebody a bit less. So you might have the 35th pick, but you may need to do pick 45 things with it. And then in pick 46, you may need to do pick 56 things with it. So
Right.
That's kind of some of the moving pieces when it comes to the MLB draft.
So we're coming in here on pick 109, 8. What are we at? It's one of those. We are deep into this thing, and the Rockies are getting ready to make another pick. Do we want to go ahead and pick a favorite? Do we want to root for? Oh, it's in. It sounds like the pick is in. Oh, we've got it coming up. Perhaps. It's at least been announced.
It's a player. We do know that.
They've taken
I think on our big
player.
board, one of the players, I think Carson Montgomery may be available. Kevin Parada is a catcher. I think he's earmarked for UCLA. So I don't know. He might be hard to sign. He's, again, another fantastic catcher, but
Here
he
it
already
is.
got one.
Case Williams. Let's find out who that is.
The Case Williams.
As well as you know. Scrolling down. Where?
Well, you got two pitchers, right? That was one of the
Yeah,
biggest pieces you
I did.
need. Going into this draft, you said you got to grab some of these college arms and one of the best college classes for pitchers that are around, right? Well, they went and they did that. They didn't get maybe the highest end of those pitchers, but they also grabbed a bat that has got a lot of people excited. It's gotten comparisons to Larry Walker even, right?
Right.
We've seen that for Zach Veen. Drew Romo could be a future perennial all-star behind the plate. It's going to be a few years. So you had some room to work with. You checked off some of the biggest boxes, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, Patrick, I think this may be a pick along the lines of exactly what we were just talking about. The Rockies, I think, have got to be really, really happy right now with their top 3 guys. And now their top priority has got to be signing those guys, getting them into the organization, making sure they've got the slot money available, because whoever Case Williams is not in Baseball America's top 2, 3, 4. I'm not
500.
He's not in the top 500.
Top 500. And you know what? The last few picks, we've
Wait, he's
seen,
a Colorado kid? Hold on now.
Yeah, he's from Douglas County and
Oh,
Douglas County High School. That's something that we
Huh.
expected to see in the later rounds of this draft is players that are not really on the radar of a lot of teams, ultimately because there was no spring season. So if this is a kid that they've had their eye on for a few years, the local area scout goes and looks and says, "Hey, this is a guy that wants to play." Carson Tucker was a guy. Cleveland ended up picking him, younger brother of Cole Tucker. He said, "Hey, I want to sign. I want to play." So he might have moved up a little bit higher than in a normal draft, but he was a high school guy that wanted to sign. Again, maybe was signed under slot just a little bit. That being said, that could be the case here. This kid might have said, "Look, I was hoping on getting drafted. I'm not going to speculate on his grades or SAT scores, anything like that. Simply put, it's just a matter of if he wants to sign and he's willing to go under slot, then so be it."
Okay. You broke that down.
baseball.
Clearly this pick has done a thing to me because I was just unable to take in any of the information that was coming my way about this guy. This is pretty shocking. Now we've talked a lot about the Rockies' unique needs at pitcher, and they've been criticized heavily in the past for not making a bigger deal out of guys growing up in altitude. They've seen some results with Kyle Freeland. Obviously, he had much more pedigree there. But I would think this is a combination of those two things, that they feel like this guy might be someone they can develop a little bit, who's grown up in the altitude, who might be a little more comfortable here. We like him, we know him, he's close by. I'm sure Ed Henderson has sat in his kitchen, all of those things, and on the other side of it, save all the money. You've got you can spend all of that on the guys you've already taken, because this kid not about to play hardball with you in signing this contract. Congratulations, Case Williams.
Yeah, according to Perfect Game, he was clocked at an event at 96 miles an hour. So obviously he's in the high end as far as those youngsters go. Was committed to Santa Clara, which is not a major baseball school. It's California, so obviously he's got some upside there. As far as a starting pitcher goes, does play a little bit of third base too. He is listed as being a pitcher, so that's going to be the first route they go. One thing we didn't really talk about much yesterday was the fact that Spencer Torkelson, first overall pick, first baseman for the Arizona State Sun Devils, he was drafted as a third baseman. So, he may end up at first base where he's used to, but okay, he's a third baseman. According to Detroit and according to Colorado, Case Williams is a right-handed pitcher who could potentially move over to third base, corner infielder, should that not play out for him. Saw him hang a couple curveballs there in the video we saw, but again, you've got control over these players for, several years to work on their abilities in the minors. So, there's a long way to go, and maybe there's some projectability, and again, ultimately, because there's not 10 rounds. 10 rounds is how long it normally is when you're dealing with bonus pools. So you could take a guy in the 10th round and get cute with him, right, to save some money. You don't have 10 rounds. You only have 5. So here we see them going in the 4th round. Maybe this is a way that they're able to work something out with a local kid. Say, hey, you're going to be a professional, but at this price. And now Zach Veen is going to get his money. Drew Romo is going to get the money that he requires as well.
Yeah, and if that's what's going on here, and they back into a decent pitcher who's not scared of altitude and dials it up to 96 and stops hanging a curveball the way we said there were a couple of rough ones in the video we got, but like you said, that's why you develop guys. There's a lot for Zach Wilson and his team and all the pitching guys to get to work on. This is a good spot in the draft to do something like this too, especially as you said, with it being a little bit condensed. We had talked about how, with 6 picks, you don't want to be throwing any away, as it were. But I don't know that this counts as that. That this is more of a strategic move that could or could not play out. But it's a win-win. You don't expect this guy to anchor your future rotation. Whatever he ends up being on the positive is just kind of a bonus here for you.
Yeah, 8-1 record last season. Again, as a junior, 6'3", 1.81 ERA, 79 Ks in 50 innings. All right, and he also played on the Rockies senior scout team. So obviously, there's a relationship between the two there.
Well, it looks like we have got a special guest. We said when we were putting this together, we weren't sure. I'm stealing your line, Patrick. You already know. If we were going to be able to match the football guys for their NFL draft coverage, they managed to bring on a Hall of Famer. And Steve Atwater, we were like, where are we going to get a Hall of Famer to come on our show? But ladies and gentlemen, we got one. Tracy Ringolsby, Hall of Fame writer. You know him, you love him. You read his work over at Inside the Seams. You've heard him on our podcast many, many times. His camera just went blank, so we're going to bring him in very slowly. But the Cowboy has been covering the Colorado Rockies for a very long time, has been around to witness the growth and development of their philosophy in the draft and develop department. It looks like we've lost Tracy, so we'll have to see what happens if he manages to come back in. Hopefully, we'll have him before too long. We got a lot to talk about here with all of these picks and what it means. And Jeff Bridich still as a relatively young GM, but Bill Schmidt is not a relatively young scouting director. He's been doing this for the Rockies for I think 18, 19 years, something like that. He's been running the scouting department there. Obviously, a lot of different scouts in and out, and various degrees of success in the drafts over the years. But it's, this is a tough one to pin down. That whole question of, are they drafting for the immediate future? Are they drafting, or are they just going after the best players available? Regardless of what they are doing, Patrick, how do you think this draft so far is going to impact like the immediate future of the Rockies sort of organization, and how long is it going to take for this to percolate and for people to feel good about it in the upper levels?
Yeah, I think you can, dole out a grade here now, with so many, top-notch players already off the board, and a lot of players that you could typically project, to contribute, to a major league club in a handful of years are not available. They're going back to school to try to improve their draft value because they were maybe a 5th or 6th round or 7th round projected player. And instead of taking less money or taking a $20,000 deal as an unsigned free agent, it just doesn't make sense for them to do that. So they're going to go back to school. All those high school players too are going to be better served going to college at that point. And teams are frankly scared of signing those high school guys because of that difficulty with signability and the unsuredness with that. So that pushes players up and really makes for a volatile situation. And I think, usually the machinations of the draft, it's hard to tell because there's 40 picks, right? And even if you only sign 30 of them, it's still hard to figure out exactly what happened. But this year, with there only being 5, I think we're beginning to see that, maybe, hey, they saved a couple bucks. They saved a couple bucks with Case Williams here, and again, we'll see where that happens.
We had him and we lost him again. We may be having fun technologically. He lives out there in the country, up there in the. All right, looks like we've got him. We're bringing him on as quickly as we can. We got to talk to the Hall of Famer, Trace Cowboy. Thanks for joining us. And what do you think of this draft so far?
Well, I think it's been an interesting one. I think, I have a lot of trust in Billy Schmidt. I think he's done a good job. I really like the first couple of picks he's made. Interesting one they just made in the 4th round when they get the high school pitcher out of Castle Rock. But, Billy lives down in Douglas County. I'm sure he's pretty much aware of Case Williams has to offer. I think when you look at the drafts that Schmidt's had ever since he finally got rid of the burden of Bill Guy Vet getting in the way of everything and interrupting, he's hit really well, and he's done exceptionally well with high school. So mean, I think that's possible. That's a good thing. I think Case Williams is interesting because, a lot like Freeland, they won't be afraid of the altitude. Kyle might have had a bad year this year, but it wasn't because he was afraid to pitch at Coors Field. It's where he grew up. I think when you grow up in that part of the country, or in our part of the country, it's kind of a chip on your shoulder. You don't want people telling you why you can't pitch well there.
Yeah, Tracy, Zach Veen, of course, their first pick yesterday, 9th overall. I don't know if there was anyone you had more interest in on the board, or if you just think, hey, the best high school hitter when he's left around at 9, you gotta take that opportunity when you got it. Zach Veen, what are your thoughts?
I had a hard time hearing you, but I mean, I think the thing you have to look at it for with him is, he's got big time power.
We got him in as quickly as we could. We held on to him for as long as we could. You have to cherish your time with Tracy Ringles, be as short as it may or may not be. See how the internet connections are running up in there. Let's go ahead because we've got another guest, a pitcher who maybe can give a little bit of an insight into some of these guys the Rockies have been taking. Someone as one of the heroes of the 2007 season, literally gave his leg in the battle for the NL pennant. Jason Hirsch, thanks for taking the time, man.
Yeah, gave my leg, right? He sawed it off and donated it to the cause.
That's how I remember it going down. Was that?
Well, I'm okay with that, I guess, at this point.
So I just wanted to get your sort of takeaways here. I know you do a lot of work out there with amateur pitchers. We were expecting the Rockies to take more pitchers up top. They end up with these guys, Chris McMahon, Seth. I keep wanting to call him Seth, and I don't know why. Sam Weatherly. And now this kid out of Douglas County, and I don't know if you know much about this kid. I didn't. So just looking for your kind of thoughts here.
Yeah, Case is definitely an interesting pick. I don't think he was really – I mean, when you talk to a lot of baseball development guys around the state of Colorado, guys like R.J. Dobovich were high on that list. Jack Moss was high on that list. Those were guys that I think you would have seen come off the board first in terms of Colorado guys. For Case to come off, obviously, congrats to him. Local kid, that's awesome. The Rockies taking a chance with a local guy, I think, is awesome. And, it shows that, he knows how to pitch at altitude. He knows, the comforts of Colorado, so to speak. Obviously, this is not where he's going to cut his teeth. This is not where he's going to develop. He's going to develop, basically all around the country. But that familiarity here, I think, shows just what, how well Kyle had done when he first came up to the big leagues. That ability to adjust to the home ballpark, I think, was an easier adjustment for him just because he had done it before. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting pick. I agree with you, Drew, in that I thought they were going to go arms early on, but I think it's one of those take the best available player who is going to potentially in your system grow and develop. I think what a lot of people need to realize is that with these draft picks, they may not ever be Rockies, and that's okay. They may end up being used as trade chips to go get somebody who will be a Rocky one day. That, again, the Rockies historically have not developed pitching for the big league level. Knowing that, you go out and draft high leverage or high ceiling position players that you can then turn around and flip for pitchers who somebody else developed and become proven at the big league level. And now that's a guy that you can use in your system. Guys
they did that with Corey Dickerson when they traded a bat right. that they developed. They got Herman Marquez.
Sure, right. Marquez and De La Rosa was another guy that they got as kind of a throw-in. He was a player to be named in the trade, and now he ends up being the greatest Rockies pitcher of all time. So at least up to this point. So again, know what you're good at. And in this case right now, the Rockies know that they're really good at developing outfielders and hitters. And if you can develop a gluttony of those and then turn around and utilize those to get the pieces that you actually want, that ends up being, kind of I know it's like a 30,000 overfoot view, and fans out there might be, well, we want to develop pitchers. I'm like, that's great, but the Rockies are not very good at that right now. Maybe in the future they will be, but we know what they are really good at, and it's a constant turnover of those kinds of guys.
Simple concept. Use a strength to improve a weakness.
Correct.
Now, you're a owner of Fast Baseball Development right there in and around Denver. There you go, rocking the shirt. Of course, drafted out of college. From what you've seen firsthand, what is the difference that you can expect from a high school arm from a college arm?
It really depends on the type of arm it is, but and the type of player you're getting. But typically with a college player, you're seeing more polish. You're seeing a higher level of competition that they have faced in their careers, and therefore you might say that that player would be effectively fast-tracked. With a high school player, you get more tread on the tires. They haven't thrown nearly as much as a collegiate player maybe would have by that point in their career. You get a lower level of competition. That's great that I struck out 8,000 people in my high school career because I throw 98 and everybody can't hit it. But you get a lot more time to develop those guys. You get an additional, let's just say 3 years, assuming that your college arm is going to get drafted as a junior. You're getting 3 years of extra time to develop those guys. So as an 18-year-old or as a 21-year-old, it just depends. Some organizations really love college arms for the polish because they need them in the big leagues faster. Some organizations are willing to put in the time with a high school arm and allow them to kind of mature and grow at their own pace. And maybe that is a 5-year plan or 4-year plan versus a college athlete who might be a 2 to 3 year plan.
As you talk about that element of it and combining it with what you said earlier about the Rockies and development, they take this kid, Chris McMahon, at 46, who's 21 and a half years old. He's got a solid pick, more of a high floor guy. They kind of like that. Is that the type of pick then that makes more sense to you than say like a Riley Pint they did a couple of years ago? Ton of potential there, but this
Right.
guy's been grown at the University of Miami a little bit and is maybe seen as a bit safer.
Yeah, I think safer is a better word there. Maybe they see him as a more immediate fit. Whatever role that they determine that he might ultimately end up filling. You'll see a lot of collegiate starters, especially guys that are high velocity guys, end up in the bullpen. You typically don't draft college bullpen arms. That's not really it's not typically a thing. It does happen. I think of like high or college, closers or high leverage, bullpen arms. I think like Houston Street, I think was like, maybe it may have been the last college closer drafted that ultimately was a closer at the big league level. So, when you look at McMahon, you say, what are the intangibles, right? Velocity, stuff. Can he get outs? Maybe he's really good at, getting lefties out or getting righties out. The Rockies go, you know what? If we fast track this guy and in 2 years, maybe he's in our bullpen contributing at the big league level, or maybe he's there sooner contributing at the big league level. It just depends on organizational needs, and then obviously what are the metrics that player brings to the table that might ultimately end up playing down the road.
You work with a lot of amateur players. If one of them comes to you and says, Coach or Jason, there's a team who called me up and offered me $20,000 to sign as a free agent because there's only 5 rounds this year, and after that, $20,000 is the limit. What would you say to one of these young players just really at the beginning of their career? Should they take that deal? What advice would you have?
That's a loaded question there, Patrick. There's a lot of factors that are going to go into that. Are you a college senior or are you a high school senior? Collegiately, what was your career like? Do you have leverage if you do go back? I mean, those are questions that are out there. I know we have. I actually had a pro organization call me and ask if I knew of any potential arms that might go undrafted that they might be able to kind of leverage into signing. And I gave them a couple of names of actually 2 local guys that are at Division I colleges that had pretty good collegiate careers, but probably maybe don't fall necessarily into a top 5 round pick kind of guy. For those guys, one's a senior, one's a junior. And obviously guys can go back now with the whole, COVID thing that went on. But if you're in that leverage position where you're saying, all right, I'm a junior or a senior collegiately, I would have to weigh my prospects and say, if I go back to school, can I improve to the point where maybe next year I am a higher draft pick than, a top 5 round? Or is school maybe not for me? I'm not really a school guy. I'm a baseball guy. I just want to get my career going, and 20 grand's enough to say, let's get my foot in the door and let's start this program so I can get to the big leagues sooner. Minor league pay is terrible. Are you willing to endure that? And I think those would be kind of questions I would want to know. What is your family situation like? Are you, do you have a family of your own at this point? What's your comfort level of being away from home on your own, with very little money in your pocket? Are you able to survive in that kind of environment? I think those are big questions that you have to ask yourself. You have to talk to your family about. For a high school kid, I think in this situation, it'd be really hard to take, an outside of the 5th round, 20 grand and go play pro ball, right? A kid who has 0 life experience, been living with mom and dad his whole career. Now you've got to talk, now you've got to basically try and survive on your own in the wild, maybe on, the East Coast or, on the West Coast or down south somewhere. I think that becomes a lot scarier situation. I think, again, going back to Drew's question earlier about, collegiate and high school athletes, again, maturity levels are really going to help determine how well that player is going to survive in that environment.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about, and I think the average fan probably doesn't think about those things too much when they're like, "Hey, how come this 19-year-old who was supposed to be awesome has gone in a slump for 2 months? What's wrong with this guy?"
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of guys are gonna wash out for that very reason. They don't know how to deal with being away from home on their own. I mean, when I was a player, when I got drafted, I was a 2nd round draft pick. I watched bonus babies that had got, fairly big paychecks that, they were out all night partying. They were blowing through their signing bonus. And, 2 years later, they're broke. They got $1 million, $2 million, whatever it was in the 1st round. And now they're dead broke and they're living paycheck to paycheck. I'm like, how did you blow through all that money? Well, that's, immaturity, being away from home for the first time with no leash on, my finances. That's a lot for a young athlete to handle.
Yeah. I want to get you back on the field for this last one. I was taking a look at the numbers from this Sam Weatherly kid, and if we're going like, hey, could turn into a lefty reliever. That slider move is 1.5 feet, and then I come across this number, a 5.5 walk rate per 9. And so I want to know, for Rockies fans looking for some hope, any kind of stories of a guy with that kind of command issue. Is there a way? How do you get that under control between now and whatever you're hoping for?
Sure, I think
that's not going to play at Coors.
Right? No, 100%. And the Rockies lead the league every year in walks, and they have since their inception. And that's definitely a problem. The reason, and I think for Rockies fans that are watching and maybe questioning the pick, I think you have to look at the metrics, and I don't know if I can pull them up real quick, or if you guys know how hard this kid throws or what his stuff grades out at. But my guess is you're talking about, one of the better SEC baseball schools in the country. And I guarantee you this kid, he's a right-hander?
He's a lefty, they say. He's touching 95, 96 there, right. Sitting at 94.
So my guess is 94, 95, 96 left-hander with above average velocity. My guess is above average stuff in general. They're not looking necessarily at the walk rate. They're looking at the metrics going, you know what, I can maybe teach this kid how to command it, or maybe he's got a mechanical flaw that they see that they think that they can fix. But they're not going to pass on a high leverage arm just because they might be scared of a walk rate. So again, this comes down to a player development standpoint, and Bill Schmidt and the whole scouting department, they look at those guys and go, these are metrics that maybe we don't see a ton of in the draft this year. and this is a kid who might have a much higher ceiling because of those metrics. Maybe he's got a high spin rate ball. Maybe he's got plus movement on his pitches. Maybe his and just looking at that video right there, it's a pretty wicked slider.
Yeah.
His fastball looks like it's riding or kind of carrying pretty good in the zone. So my guess is he's probably a high spin rate guy. He's got plus metrics on his breaking pitches, and they feel like maybe he's just one little tweak away from being a legitimate arm in their organization.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate all the insight, Jason. It's a lot. We got to learn about these guys, and it really helps knowing all these ins and outs. We can't thank you enough for taking the time today.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. Anytime.
Thank you, Jason.
Yep. Take care.
All right, Patrick, I'm going to have to let you bring in our next guest because I know how you Jersey guys got to hang together.
Well, yeah, this is the thing. And so, yeah, my guest here is Tom Sutaris, the hitting coach for the High A Lancaster Jethawks. And thanks for joining us, Tom. There you see him a couple years ago in the All-Star game as one of the Southern Cal coaches of the California League. And, Tom, Drew always has Colorado people on, extolling the virtues of Colorado. Now one of my own, near and dear to my heart, from the Jersey Shore, Toms River, New Jersey. Tom, start off by telling us how great of a baseball community we have on the East Coast in Toms River.
I'll tell you what, if you don't know about Toms River baseball, I don't know what's going on, because it's an incredible place to be. I mean, seriously, like the number of players that have come out of that area, it's been unbelievable, because you think of it as a northern state, but the density of baseball players in there is just incredible. And I've also been in Texas and in Arizona, so I've been around some great baseball in my life. And it was obviously I'm proud to be a Jersey guy, and proud of where I come from. So
we were texting back and forth, and you brought up the name J.M. Gold, who I think he went 8th overall in 1998 to the Brewers. And I remember, I think he was 10-1 that season, was fantastic for Toms River North. I was 3-0 my senior year, and I did not get drafted, nor did I get an offer to sign as an undrafted free agent. So were you scouting then? You missed me on that one. That's the one that you missed.
I was not scouting then, but it's kind of funny. I came back from being in the college game, and I came back and they're like, you got to see this kid. I thought I was a big college guy, and I'd seen it all. Then you get this kid out of the mound throwing 97, 98 miles an hour with no effort. I'm like, wow, this kid, that's something special. That's one of my first chances to see somebody who was really elite, and I had a few years later, all the three Frazier brothers came through, with Todd being the last one, and what an unbelievable group of players coming through there. And the games at that point, if there was one Toms River High School, would have been among the best in the country. I mean, we had three great teams in one town, and it was just impressive area to grow up in and be around some great baseball people.
Tom, we want to ask you about some of these guys. I got two things before we get totally away from the Jersey stuff, because I am a new hockey guy. You a Devils fan?
Flyers
okay.
fan.
Okay. Well,
so South Jersey is like equidistant to New York and Philadelphia. So you've got them. You've got both. You can have your pick.
Yeah, I gravitated towards the Philadelphia teams. I don't know why I always heard, maybe because the Rocky movies came out about that time, but I that connected with me because that's kind of my personality. So I love Philly.
Our producer, Allie, is from Philadelphia, and anytime she has a chance to talk about Phillies or the Eagles, she's jumping in on it. She's throwing her hands up. You can't see. She's like, yeah, Philly.
Very excited.
I believe purple now. That's what I'm saying. But.
So, Tom, I talked to a couple of guys yesterday. We talked to Zach Wilson and we talked to Kyle Kercheval about this being sort of like Christmas, and I would think we'd feel the same too. But I'm also wondering, what's more exciting to get your hands on eventually a guy like a Zach Veen, who's just this extraordinary talent, or maybe some of these other guys who you see the potential there that's yet to be unlocked, and hey, we've got a little work to go here, but I see what you can become.
Honestly, I'd love to tell you one or the other, but I love working with every kid that we have. Like, every one of them presents a unique challenge and a unique way of trying to connect with them. And to me, those personal relationships are what it's all about. I mean, maybe you have a kid who's drafted in the 30th round who's working and sweating in there every day. And believe me, I feel like we give him the same attention. We give our guy who's a first or second rounder. To me, it's not about that. It's about the person. And that's, to me, what is so much more important than, his status. I grew up in a house and there was always a belief that we treat the janitor the same way we treat the CEO. And not that we have anybody like that, but to me, it's about treating everybody special and finding unique challenges, because you don't know until you dive in there and develop that relationship and find out, what makes them tick and what makes them go. And it's just fun to try to figure that all out. It's like a great puzzle. It's so much fun.
Colorado has so many interesting affiliates as far as the ballparks and the situations that they play, and it makes it really challenging for the pitchers, and that they need to be prepared for that. But to a man, when I talk up to some of the guys that you've been coaching over the years in Lancaster, I ask them, like, it's probably real easy to just pop a ball up, and it can carry out there in the Cal League, especially in Lancaster, right? There's some notoriously bad winds that can come there. How do you keep your players, within themselves and say, look, you got to do the little things well. Don't just look, hey, I had 2 doubles today, when really maybe you got lucky.
Yeah, well, to me, it's about just being consistent in what they're doing and having them approach on the road and at home, and basically having an idea of what they're doing. It's not so much about having a great night tonight, but it's about whatever you're going to do to be a Colorado Rocky in the future and help us win a World Series. So to us, we're always talking about winning baseball. The benefit of being in a place like Lancaster is, if you encourage guys and you're positive with them and they square for baseball, they're going to get a result off. And I think the real challenge in baseball is when you go to a tough hitter's park and then you hit some balls well and they don't get the result, and now they start chasing hits. And to me, it's a mental game. There's so much of it is about your mentality. And if you go into a game that's against a tough pitcher and you hit a couple balls hard and you get the result, it doesn't have to be, well, that might have been an out somewhere else. They feel that and they build off of that. I think it's the best thing there is being able to create confidence in hitters, because they're going to get the result if they square the baseball. Obviously, they're going to get their cheap hits here and there. But I'll tell you what, a lot of the guys, it's between their ears at their confidence level to skyrocket. Because they know when they barrel up a baseball, a lot of good things happen there. And I think that works between their ears more than it works like, oh, he just got lucky. Guys when batting titles there, doesn't mean they got lucky and had a bunch of wind-blown hits. It means they probably hit the ball hard, and their confidence was probably skyrocketing all season. Yeah. So I think it's really beneficial to play there from a hitting perspective, but I don't think it's just about hitting a pop-up and go, and it's about doing things right and staying in the process.
Have you had an opportunity yet to take a look at Zach Veen and Drew Romo much, and can you give us just a couple takeaways of what you've seen in their swings a little bit?
Obviously, what I've seen in Zach Veen, I've only seen a little bit of him. It's impressive. He does so many things well. He moves so well. He looks really athletic. There's some special things you're seeing there. And it's funny. I've worked with Drew Romo in a roundabout way probably 4 years ago when he was a freshman in high school, and I was at the University of Texas, and he came to our camp in the summer. And immediately he was just, he's a small kid at the time, and he was so athletic, and I love his athleticism is the one thing that stands out. And I believe when you're athletic and you're working, everything about him, I remember him because of his character, not because of, some unbelievable gift he had. He's still really young at the time, but there's just something about his motor and the way he went about his business that to me was really, really impressive.
That can be a separator for any ball player, but for a catcher especially, you would think.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, I think that's definitely a separator. And, at the end of the day, the guys we get are so incredibly gifted. Even the guys that, don't make it, and you say, wow, what was he meant? A lot of times it's not that. It's what goes on between the ears and their mentality. And to be able to difference if you see 16 pitches in a night, to not give a single pitch away, to be locked in for 16 pitches night in, night out is what is the difference maker. If you zone out and chase 5 pitches because – I think I'm going to get a fastball and you swing with no plan, no purpose. They're the guys that, kind of get caught up somewhere. But those guys that are consistent every single day and stay off the roller coaster during the season, they're the guys that are elite. So I think those intangibles are so crucial for, what guys end up there and what guys don't. And it's so hard to see until you spend time with them and get to know them. who has those special abilities.
Yeah, there's, I imagine like most of the times with the players, they're not looking to see the prospect rankings, and they don't care about that. They're doing the little things every day, and I'm sure it's the same thing with the coaches. But two guys that I've been following, and I think they don't really get their just due that you've worked with in the recent past are Casey Golden and Alan Trejo, two guys that again. Some people in the industry, don't fancy them that much, but everything that I've seen tells me that these are some real quality players and should be, given a lot more respect when it comes to young up-and-coming stars of the future.
Absolutely. I mean, Alan just plays defense. His brain works at another level. He's so advanced in his mental game, especially defensively. He's always thinking one step ahead. And he's obviously can do some damage in the box. He has some hit ability. He does a lot of things really, really well that are going to help you win ball games. And at the end of the day, that's what we're looking for. Guys can go up to Colorado and help us win ball games. You can put them in there, and you can rely on them. You can trust them. And that's Allen. He's going to be in the right spot. And Casey just has raw power that's just it's special. I mean, when the ball hits his bat, it just makes a different sound. And I mean, the ball just goes, and he's so strong. He's so physical. He can run. There's so many things he does that he brings to the table for an organization, and he just keeps getting better.
And I think in 2018, when you guys hosted the Cal League All-Star game, you had a guy there that did pretty well in the home run derby, and to my knowledge, I think he's having the best 2020 of any player in the world, and that would be Roberto Ramos.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm so happy for him. He was so much fun to be around, and such a great kid. And I'm so happy to see him having that success. It's just so weird that we're looking to see him. I'm turning on games at 11:30 at night watching because I think he's going to get one more at bat just to stay up and watch him. We had a really good relationship, and I miss seeing him every day, to be honest with you, selfishly. But I'm happy for him, and I'm happy to see him having success.
No, he's putting on a show out there for sure. Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining us, giving us some insight on these guys, and I'm sure you're excited to get to work with them here pretty soon.
No, absolutely. No, I mean, I'm just itching to spend some time with these kids because that's what it's all about. My wife is really getting tired of talking hitting with me, so I'm looking forward to it. So,
are you working on her stance? Are you making sure she's got good separation, or?
No, she just talks. She says, "I do it naturally, and you got to trust me on it." And she's a strong-willed Texan, and I do it. She hits the ball, so I let her do her thing. Yeah, you got to.
You can't argue with the results. All right.
No, really not.
Thank you so much, Tom. We'll be sure to catch up very soon.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure. It's great talking New Jersey. I'm kind of all fired up about talking Jersey right now. So you guys have.
Can you say the name Harrison for us?
Harrison.
No, you say it normal. We weren't sure if Patrick.
I don't know.
Patrick
I don't know
says
if it's
Harrison. Harrison.
I don't know if it's my Philly. I say Wooder from Philly.
Wooder.
I got the Wooder.
I have to focus on water.
Water, yeah.
I have to focus.
Yeah.
And I got the North Jersey when I talk about, if I'm talking about day one of the draft, I'm talking about yesterday. So I got the New York yesterday, and I'm drinking some Wooder. Those are my two accents combining together.
I love it. Well, it's great to talk to you guys. You guys have a great night, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you.
Great talking with you.
We'll have to have him back on again once he's working with those guys. Talk more
He's
Jersey.
Awesome.
Look at that.
He's great.
Yeah,
he's worked with some fantastic guys down at Lancaster. Really, just every guy that comes through there. I've seen, a handful of guys at Asheville, do relatively well, but they really seem to take the next step with Tom in Lancaster, and whether they stay in the organization or they go elsewhere, like Roberto Ramos. We even saw that with Luis Castro, who I think he was the co-MVP last year of the Cal League. So I mean. Tom's doing some big things with Lancaster. He's been all around, so it was great having a couple of minutes talking with him.
Absolutely. We'll have to have him back. Do want to remind everyone that our draft day coverage is brought to you by MSU Denver, which is a great place to go and better your education, whether you're starting out, trying to finish up, just getting some new tools in your bag. But it's also, of course, important that while you're studying, you got your beverages ready to go. You got your Breck brew. If you're more of a Strava craft coffee person while you're trying to stay awake for your studies at MSU, I could totally understand that as well. But you got to make sure that you're checking out all of our sponsors, helping them out during this time because they help us out during this time. And we really appreciate it, just like we really appreciate all the guests that we've had on so far today. We've still got at least one more really fun one I know on deck for you that we weren't able to get to earlier to get into the pitching conversation. But I wanted to do really quick, Patrick, while we've got a little bit of time, something I was hoping we would have time for.
What you got?
We got to talk about some weird ass baseball names. I love weird baseball names. I don't know if we can come up with a full power ranking before we got to get back into talking to our next guest and getting on the board here, but Blaze Jordan,
we're naming
Slade
names.
Ciccone,
Yes.
Pete Crow Armstrong,
PCA,
Dylan Dingler, Carmen Mlodzinski. I want to put that L in there. Mlodzinski. No. That L is a trick. It's a trap. Leave it alone. Then you got Drew Bowser, underrated, named after the villain of Super Mario Brothers, of course.
Yes, because that's how it works in America. Okay. Your family name is the first, and your last name is off of a Nintendo game. Absolutely right there, Drew Yoshi.
That's 100%. You know what I would give if people would actually call me Drew Yoshi. You know how cool. Well, maybe actually it doesn't really flow. I don't care. You put a Nintendo thing at the end of my name, and I'm rolling with it. There's no way that.
Can I just say the number of Drews and Patricks in the MLB? I'm starting to understand why you guys cover this sport.
No, there aren't a lot of Drews and Patricks in MLB. It's only in Colorado. Only.
Everything on this show has led me to believe there are a lot of Drews and Patricks in the MLB. So.
It's very
Drews
true.
and Patricks everywhere. There were also 5 Austins in this draft.
No, whose name? Who did you say?
Austin. That's right. 316 says Austin Martin, very close to being a car.
Yeah. Well, I have a car crash too. That sounds like a little like Mick Foley's music when he would come out, but I couldn't figure out a way to shoehorn that in.
Oh yeah. Well.
That was disappointment.
Next time. Here are some that I think
I like
are
the first name, Alika Williams.
There were a lot that had that going on where like one of the names was super interesting and then it was like Smith or Williams.
Arizona State had the 3 like best as a team goes, right? Spencer Torkelson, Alika Williams, Gage Workman.
Gage Workman's a good one.
They won the draft name-wise.
Name-wise, they did very well. I'll give you some that are underrated. People might think, it's just a name. I like the name Carson Montgomery. Underrated good name. That's a
big leaguer name.
Yeah, Carson Montgomery. That's quality stuff.
And Ed Howard. We've acknowledged Ed Howard. He could have played in the 1940s, 1950s. He may have. I'm not sure if he's a time traveler or not.
Yeah.
But he's a dude.
Get confirmation for you on that. Daxton Fulton.
Dax, yes.
Daxton Fulton. Here's one I really like, and there were multiple Slades in this, but Slade Wilkes. Yeah.
A lot of
Slades.
Like that.
So, you guys inspired me to look up some of the best baseball names in history just now.
Oh, sure.
History. Okay.
And
then Tris Speaker, Rabbit.
There are plenty of great names, but there is only one man I've found. In 1910, there was a baseball player that was just named Beer.
Hooray, beer.
So, is this normal for baseball? Should I just accept that players just can be named whatever they want in this sport? I mean, I'm coming from a sport where people are just named things that Nordic letters and you use stuff like that.
They're all consonants.
You add a Y on the end, right? Rudo-y.
Yeah, that's your nickname.
No, it's there's a player right now in the Diamondbacks organization, Seth Beer. So beer night is going to be every night at Chase Field.
So, Bruno, you just have to be a baseball fan now, pretty much.
That's the rules, I think. A person named Beer, by law, I have to follow that sport now. So,
and as far as baseball reference, and as you know, a lot of these documentarians, keep track. They don't treat the guy's real first name as their name. It's their nickname is their name. So if you look, there's like 25 guys named Lefty, but none nicknamed Righty.
Not a single one.
That
There apparently before his time, a baseball player named 10 Million
the
in the
Rockies,
1911.
Rockies drafted a guy named Doug Million, first rounder, never made it to the majors.
Did he make $1 million at least?
Probably not.
Oh,
Well, he was
brutal.
a first round pick.
Oh,
So
no,
yeah,
he was a
he had
first
signing
rounder.
bonus.
So good. You're right. He might have made $1 million. We're talking. So I was going to say when I was a kid, it was Milton Bradley and Coco Crisp and Pokey Reese and
Covelli Crisp, Gookie Dawkins,
Man, there's a couple names on this
was
list that I
another
cannot put on a stream.
Pumpsy Green. I like the name Pumpsy Green. He was the first black player ever for the Boston Red Sox. The last team to integrate.
Dizzy. There have been some Dizzies over the years.
Yeah, a few
And his
dizzies.
Dazzy. There's also
Dizzy and
Dazzy
Dazzy.
Dance. Yes.
It's an unusual game we play.
And you got Paul and Lloyd Wainer, whose nicknames were Big Poison and Little Poison. And you go, well, it was because they were great hitters. And it's true. They're the only brothers to ever make it to the Baseball Hall of Fame. They, of course, played for the Pittsburgh Pirates. But the reason they got their nickname was not because of their poisonous bats, but it was because when they went to a game in Brooklyn, someone stood up and, as they were standing next to each other and they looked alike, someone in the stand said, "Hey, there's a big poison and a little poison." And thus, a nickname was born.
Wow.
True.
This
These things are true.
is the game that we love. This is it. This is the thing we've chosen to devote most of our lives
You
to.
didn't mention Burl Caraway. That's
I
another
didn't.
good name.
Actually, he was next on my list after Slade Wilkes. Marquise Grissom Jr.
Yes.
was in this draft, and that's always been a phenomenal name. Marquise Grissom. It just sounds like he's an attorney at law or a great baseball player or like a Supreme Court justice.
He's
It's
a pitcher.
Marquise Grissom.
He is not an outfielder like his dad.
Weird.
He's a pitcher. And in fact, you can take it one step beyond that and really call him Marquise Grissom II.
Anytime you can get a Roman numeral at the end of a name that's already dope. Yeah. I've also got Zach McCambly.
Yes, he was recently taken. I like Zach DeLoach, and I was hoping we could see if we can get some copyright music from Rage Against the Machine when Zach DeLoach gets drafted, but I don't think that's going to work out.
+5 to anyone who gets that. I like
Thanks.
Petey Halpin.
That's
Petey-
a good one.
Petey
He was
is-
taken today.
Yeah. Yeah. Like he could have gone by Pete or Peter, but he doesn't. And again, it's like you were saying earlier, he's listed as Petey Halpin. It's what it's going to say on his soon-to-be-made baseball reference page. Petey Halpin.
I was worried you're going to say Tombstone. So I'm glad you. I'm glad you said his
I'm
baseball.
looking
card.
quite that far into the future here today.
We're riffing here, man. I wasn't sure what was going to come out. Yeah, baseball has some great names, and you can actually pronounce them.
Yeah,
Majinski was the hardest one.
It was the closest to hockey.
Kerstad, you should know. Nordic culture, the J is silent.
There was an AJ
know that.
Vukovic who sounds like a hockey player. AJ Vukovic. I like Landon Knack. I think that's an underrated good name. Landon Knack.
Colt Keith. Not Keith Colt.
Colt Keith. Okay. That's a professional wrestler. That's a Daniel Bryanson situation. That's a Brian Danielson. Yeah. No, he switched that around to sound cooler.
Trenton Denholm. You're doing too much.
Yeah,
You're doing too much.
That's trying too hard.
Not doing too much. Joe Boyle.
Oh, Joe Boyle. I like because you got to say it as one. You can't say Joe Boyle. It's Joe Boyle.
And this last one is for Rudo, because this player goes to school not too far where I went. He goes to CBA, Christian Brothers Academy in New Jersey. The best player out of New Jersey, Patrick Riley. Great name.
Gotta love Patrick's. I also enjoyed Kalai Rosario, Anthony Servideo, and Milan Tolentino.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love all his movies. Man,
Big
controversial.
Tolentino guy.
Controversial
Sure.
baseball director, but
Yeah. Great with the dialogue and the action sequences, but some questions about how he puts his stuff together. Well, sadly, it looks like we're going to hang on for just a second. Let's talk a little bit more pitching. Hopefully, we'll be able to get our last guest in here. It sounds like we're having a couple of technical issues getting it together, but let's summarize our thoughts here. I think we walked up to this line earlier, Patrick, about giving the Rockies a grade overall for the 2020 draft. I'll let you take the floor to begin with. Overall, how do you feel like the Rockies have done today?
I think overall, obviously on the second day of a draft, once you get, after the second round, there's not going to be a lot of pop. So your grade's going to be based on what you did in day one. And, it's exciting. It's exciting what they were able to do with Zach Veen and Drew Romo. But I think the goal was to grab some high-end starting pitchers out of the college ranks. And, they grabbed one of those guys in Chris McMahon. So that's good. The second one, there are some questions about Sam Weatherly, and that remain to be seen. So time will tell. I would probably give them a B. I would give them a solid B. Again, a lot of excitement. It's a class that is a B right now, but going forward, you could say, hey, this is one of the better classes, at least high end. One of the disadvantages of this class is that there was no 6th, 7th, 8th. You know what I mean? You're not going to get that gem where you go, hey, shoot, you know what? When the Rockies went on and they had a deep run and went to the NLCS in 2022, they got contributions from these two guys, and maybe they were only worth one WAR in their career, but they came out of this year's draft or a previous year's draft, and you go, hey, that factors in with how good you did, and the Rockies just don't have that benefit. So it's going to be hard in the grand scheme of things to grade them on this, especially because they had the disadvantage of not being able to go deep. It's like a lot of things in 2020. There's so many disadvantages, and at least with hockey and basketball, they're coming back, and people might forget going forward. In 20 years, people are going to forget the fact that the season took a 4-month break right there in the middle. But with the MLB season, you're going to look and you're going to see a drastically reduced amount of games, and it's really going to be hard to contextualize any of it. And I think that the same applies for this draft. So hard to contextualize, but right now in this moment, got to give him a B. You've got a big bat in Zach Veen, and you've got a big wish, you got a big hope that Drew Romo becomes everything you think he's going to be.
Absolutely. Well, it does look like we've got another guest in, so I'll give my grade after we've talked to someone from your old stomping grounds. We've talked to some people back at my old ones, but we've got from the Boulder Collegians running the show over there, knowing a thing or two about amateur baseball. Doesn't look like we've got any video for you, so we're just going to be hearing the voice of Matthew Jensen. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, and how are you enjoying the draft?
There's a draft going on?
Is that what's happening?
No, I'm just kidding. Life sometimes allows you to participate in things, and sometimes it doesn't. And my life does not allow me to participate in the draft at this point. I'm out quarantining myself in my car. As you can see, I have a 6-year-old and a wife at home that probably I'm driving crazy at this point. So, in all honesty, Major League Baseball draft, all put together, it's been challenging ever since I created the Collegians to really get into any other baseball outside of my own, just because I'm so wrapped up in it. And I'm a season ticket holder for the Rockies, and Patrick and I have even said hello to each other out there a few times, and I enjoy the game a lot. But again, as an owner of your own team, it sort of doesn't allow you to pay attention as much as I might like to.
Well, you mentioned the Boulder Collegians, of course. You are maybe one of the only owners. I know the Montforts are not, but you're one of the few actually playing baseball. The Rocky Mountain Baseball League is a summer collegiate league right here in Colorado, featuring some fine college players from around the country, Division I even, and you guys are having games. How is that going so far? You just started last Monday. How are the collegians doing? How is the league doing?
Well, we're alive. We're playing baseball, and we're actually broadcasting our games too. So we're putting it out there for the world to see, and it's very different. It's and I want to be very careful with my title that I give myself as an owner, because our team isn't 501c3. So technically, in the baseball sense, I'm an owner. In the nonprofit sense, I'm actually an employee. But we're very, very proud as a league and as an organization to be able to offer these young ball players an opportunity to play after the hiatus that they've had over the last few months. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to be a ball player right now, and I feel like these guys probably feel like they're missing a limb, not being able to be out there and play ball. And I know you guys are talking about draft and professional baseball, but again, I view those two things, very differently, where my guys are still running through a brick wall to get to that next level, whatever it takes, playing hurt, playing sick, and these young men now they're risking their health. While we're opening things up in the state of Colorado, there still are some risks, and as a league and as an organization, we certainly take those things very, very seriously. We've implemented some new procedures. I know a lot of talk around the major leagues is how are they going to do it, and we've had to move all of our games out to sort of this. It's pretty cool, actually, this kind of field of dreams field out in Weld County. Where Weld County's restrictions are a little bit less, but that doesn't mean that we take the state restrictions any less serious. And we've got masks. We're doing temperature checks. We're extending dugouts out for guys. We're not telling fans and parents that they can't show up, but we want to make sure that they're social distancing if they do choose to do that. We're around and we're here. We're very proud to have baseball right now and to be one of the only ones, the only show in town.
Yeah, we real quick before we let you go, glad to hear you guys are being safe. Is there a name or two you could give us to maybe keep an eye out for the 2021 draft? Who's the best collegian you got right now? It's early in the season, I know.
It's a little early for us to say. Honestly, there's a lot of guys shaking the rust off, and I don't know right now. I need more time with my guys before I can start putting draft status on them. You put me on the spot there. We've got some names to look out for us this year. I really like the way Tyler Mata from Rocky Mountain High School has played. He's down at Eastern Arizona Junior College. Real scrappy second baseman player. Cherokee LeBeau from Oakland, one of our D1 guys, is out there. Nick Arrivo plays at Eckerd College out in Florida. He's one of our returning guys. And really what we're trying to do is, it's a COVID season, so we're trying to get these guys in the right mindset to change things up a little bit. You can't go out and throw 50% breaking balls. You got to hit the fastball right now when you see it. And so we're trying to really get these guys back, slow the game down for them so that they can go out and get better.
All right, Mel. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We appreciate everything you got to say. We'll hopefully have you on again, talk more collegians. We'll send people your way this year. It's somewhere where they can go out and see some baseball. So if you're listening to this, check them out. Go find some collegians baseball.
Our website, bouldercollegians.com, will have our schedule and links and a backstory. We've got a real rich history of professional ball players and even some Hall of Famers. I'm sure Patrick will elaborate. But thank you. I'm really excited to be here with you guys. I'd love to come on again.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Matt. Good seeing you, buddy.
All right, well, we got to go right next to our next guest here, somebody I'm very excited to talk to. It doesn't look like we were able to get the video to work out, but we do have the audio. One of my go-to sources whenever I'm talking about or thinking about pitching, we have always got to talk to a former Colorado Rockies pitcher, grew up in the altitude. Now you can find his work over at woodypage.com. One of our favorites, Mark Knudsen. Glad we were able to get everything worked out here, Mark. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Almost everything. Couldn't quite get the audio or the video to work. I tried my iPod. My iPad wasn't cooperating, so on my PC, but I don't have a camera here. By the way, next time you have Matt Jensen on, I coach in the other league. There's two collegiate leagues around here. Jason Hirsch's league is not going to function this year as a league, so we'll play independent. I coach with the Greeley Grays on that team. We played Matt's team last year. We played the collegians. Coached by a very good friend of mine, Mark Goodman, who was on my staff at my high school staff a couple years ago. He's now the head coach of the Collegians. Matt Jensen came into the game and pitched against us. He suited up, and he came in the game and he pitched against us last year on July 4th. So you're going to have to ask him about his outing against the Greeley Grays last year on July 4th. He came out of the press box. He'd been doing announcing because our boy Jake, wasn't there that day, Shapiro. Yeah. So Matt was in uniform, doing the PA announcing, came down and pitched in the game. So,
That's
I mean,
amazing.
You got some stories with that guy. He's a character. And the field he's playing at now is called Bigfoot Turf Farms up in LaSalle. We played a scrimmage game up there with my kids a few weeks ago. Greg Johnson, the guy who runs that place, is just a phenomenal guy. High school kids, it's the only game in town. It's a privately owned field, so it is a field of dreams. It's out there in the middle of a turf farm. And it's a field of dreams in reality, and it's also privately owned, so restrictions don't matter. Right now, the high schools and the colleges their fields are locked down, and it's making it hard for anybody to play baseball.
Yeah, I would imagine. And Mark, I know you're real plugged in this area. You do a lot of work in the state with pitchers, with just ball players in general. Yep. So I'm going to assume you know way more about Case Williams than I do. I want to talk to you about the other guys, but okay, give me your thoughts here.
He's a 5A kid, so I didn't see him. I coach at 3A. But Dan O'Dowd, I was watching before I came on. I was watching Dan O'Dowd on there. Dan brought up a point that you and I have talked about a lot, Drew, and that's local kids drafting a local kid, a Kyle Freeland kind of kid who's used to these conditions. And it's not just the altitude; it's the dryness, it's all sorts of things. But you draft a kid like that who isn't going to be afraid to pitch here. That's all he knows. I know when I was drafted, I was a third-round pick of the Astros, and I was from here, and I went down to Florida, and I had to make the reverse adjustment. I had to learn how to deal with a ball that broke a little bit more and moved a little more. I sweated a whole lot more. So I had to make the reverse adjustment. And I think that in itself is difficult to do, but he will have the advantage. Now, where's he going to go? He's not going to play. Maybe is there going to be a Grand Junction Rockies in the future? We don't even know that. So he's going to play, probably start next year in Arizona. If there's anything he can do this year in the fall, that would be in Arizona. So, and a high school kid's always going to be 5 or 6 years away. Let's just be honest. It's not, he's not going to be here next year. But when he does get here, and hopefully he comes back here and trains in here in the off season and stays acclimated to these conditions, he'll be one of those guys that doesn't complain about it, which is wonderful.
Yeah, some of these pitchers, particularly, Sam Weatherly is a guy who was we saw him taken in the third round there by Colorado. Only has 2 pitches. A changeup is not there. One pitch that seems like it would be relatively effective in Colorado was thrown by a former teammate of yours, Mike Scott, the split finger fastball. How difficult of a pitch is that to throw? And do you think that could be one that would be relatively effective at Coors Field and keeping the ball down?
Yeah, a split finger fastball is dependent on your arm angle. If you're a 3/4 guy, you're going to have trouble with that pitch because the way it's gripped and the spin will be more sideways. It won't really do as much. It'll be more of a changeup. Mike Scott threw right over the top. He was your classic L arm angle guy, right over the top. So his fingers were at 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock, which is where you want if you're going to get the tumble, the straight down tumble. So it's not a pitch for everybody to use, but any pitch here will be effective, especially somewhere you're taking spin and taking speed off a ball. I know talking to Darren Holmes about this a couple of years ago, he said the pitch that he thought was the most negatively impacted by the altitude was the cutter. And we saw it with a guy like Tyler Chatwood. And it's just the way the spin, they do their thing with spin rate and all that stuff. And they noticed the cutter was not really super effective here. They really started teaching curveballs. They've been pushing John Gray to throw a curveball. They want curveballs because the spin is tighter. The tighter the spin, the less the altitude is going to affect it. So a split finger is essentially a changeup. It's just a changeup. The effectiveness of it is it looks just like a fastball. It leaves the hand, so it just runs out of juice when it gets to the home plate and drops because of the velocity. So any pitch here can be effective if it's thrown properly, but some pitches are harder to throw here than others.
Well, we saw that work for Hideo Nomo when he threw a no-hitter, right?
Exactly. And that real humid night, a real rainy, humid night, like I said, anything can work if you do it right.
Ubaldo used a splitter for a decent effect for a while. And,
yes,
and
he did.
De La Rosa's changeup was a split changeup.
Yep.
So
it was. Right over the top guys, too.
What do you think of this kid, Chris McMahon, out of Miami?
Well, first of all, you and I talked earlier, and I talked to Patrick Saunders about this, too. Last year, the Rockies drafted all college guys, right? Start to finish, all college guys. That tells you that your farm system's a little less deep than you'd like it to be. You need guys to get here quicker. Because a college kid, if he does it right, is going to be here in a couple of years, maybe. I mean, Troy Tulowitzki was a year and a day, I think. So those guys are going to be on the fast track to get here. When you're feeling better about the depth in your farm system, you'll take a flyer on a high school kid. The kid, that's why I said I don't know anything about the kid from Florida, the high school outfielder they got from Florida in the first round. They must feel like they got another David Dahl prospect. That's the guy that jumped to mind for me. But the pitcher from Miami is ready. He should be close, right? He's pitched at the highest level of college baseball. He's proven himself. He's grown up. I mean, personally, if I was in the front office, I'd stay away from high school kids because you just don't know what you're going to get. They're so young. You're giving them a ton of money. You have no idea. You might get a Nolan Arenado. You might get a Trevor Story. You might get a Doug Million. You have no idea what you're going to get, right? So with a college
second
kid,
Doug Million shout out on this show.
May he rest in peace. But
that's right.
You're going to get guys who at the college level who you're a little bit more sure of, like they got last year with the first baseman from UCLA, like they got the pitcher from Mississippi State, Rollison, last year. Those guys are on the faster track. So I think McMahon will be on the faster track, certainly, than being the first round pick.
Yeah, I like that. And obviously, the high school catcher is not going to be on anywhere close to a fast track. No. But when I started reading about the defensive capabilities of this kid, I mean, at what level it does the ability for a guy to do all the things as a catcher taken from like pretty good, great to elite, and when does it really start to matter? When does it make a difference for you as a pitcher?
A catcher has to be of the mindset that defense is his number one priority. That's the biggest thing that the pitchers are worried about. I had the privilege of pitching to a guy named Charlie O'Brien, who became Greg Maddox's personal catcher later in his career. Charlie was an okay hitter, but that didn't matter. Charlie was all about catching. He was all about the defensive position, and he was extraordinary at it. There's very few Johnny Benches or Yadier Molinas or guys like that can do both. Now I'll throw something at you guys. Who's the best quarterback the Denver Broncos have ever drafted?
Oh. Yeah, this is one of those.
Kind of been a black hole, hasn't it? Who's the best goaltender the Avalanche have ever drafted?
Rudo's going to have to send us a message on that
one. another black hole, right?
Yeah.
The Rockies have that black hole at catcher. They've had an all-star at every single position on the diamond except catcher during their career history. So they're going to look at a kid like this. The name escapes me. The kid who played at Regis, I think Max George is the kid who played at Regis, who they've converted to a catcher, just like they did with Tony Wolters. The best catcher they've ever drafted, you could argue, is a guy named Nolan Arenado, right? You could argue that.
Yeah.
Right. And then he doesn't even become a catcher. So I think they've got, obviously a high school kid is somebody, they must have the raw tools, must be spectacular for him to be in the first round draft pick, but he's a long ways away. He's got to learn pitch selection. He's been relying on his arm. He's got to work on pop times. A guy like Tony Wolters is a perfect guy to learn that from, because Tony Wolters' pop time is extraordinary. Tony's not a spectacularly good defensive catcher, receiving all that, but boy, does he get rid of the baseball. It barely touches his glove before it's on its way to second base, and that's the envy of most catchers. So if the kid's got the tools, he's got the strong arm, he's got all that, and he can learn how to get rid of the ball, call a game, make sure everything stays away from the backstop. All those things that are critically important to a baseball game. He can be an impact guy, and I don't even know how he hits. That really is secondary to how he catches.
Yeah, you mentioned Charlie O'Brien, caught until he was 40 years old, and is the answer to an interesting trivia question of who brought the hockey-style goaltender mask to the major leagues. It was Charlie O'Brien when he
did one of that. He did. He really.
Toronto.
Well, Charlie had that big curly head of hair, and so he had to cover it up somehow. But
what made him so effective? Wow, you called him the greatest catcher you've worked with.
He was the best guy I threw to. He had incredibly soft hands. He accepted the ball. The ball didn't smack his glove. Right? It's like a pillow. And Tom Seaver told me once that Jerry Grody was like that too. Because I mentioned to Tom Seaver, who was my idol. That's why I wore 41 my whole career. And I was talking to him once when he was a broadcaster, and I said, "Man, it must have been great to throw to Johnny Bench, who was my idol as a kid." He said, "The best catcher I ever threw to was a guy named Jerry Grody, who had these incredibly soft hands. The ball just kind of went in there. Jerry Grody would break in his glove with 5 baseballs from pinky to thumb. And so he could catch the ball on his pinky, which was off the plate. And the umpire didn't know. He thought it might have got it on the thumb, right? So a guy like that, nuances like that, make great catchers. And Charlie was a guy who he didn't take his at-bats back behind the plate with him. The other catcher on our team that year was a guy named B.J. Surhoff, who was a star, right? B.J. was a great player. But B.J. was an offensive player. B.J. loved to hit. He ended up playing the outfield for the Braves. And B.J. would make an out and then come back behind home plate and be mad about it. And maybe he's talking to the umpire about a pitch during his at-bat, which is very common. I'm not dissing B.J. in any way, shape, or form, but his mindset was offense first. And Charlie was exactly the opposite. Charlie was defense first. That's really, really important for a catcher, and that's one of the reasons Charlie was so great.
It's interesting when you say that about Drew Romo, because in the write-up, one of the things it says, soft hands.
Soft hands.
That's super important for a catcher.
Called his games in high school, too.
Yeah, you're not pancaking the ball. You're not slapping the ball. You're just kind of absorbing the ball, right? You're catching it. And that's important. And my hat's off to his coach if he'd let him call it. I let my catchers call their pitches. I think it's the pitchers, first of all, calling the pitches, right? The pitcher's deciding what he's going to throw. Right. So for me to call the pitches from the bench is kind of dumb because it's a suggestion. That's all it is. And the same with if the catcher's looking at me every pitch, the catcher's not learning anything. I want the pitcher and the catcher to have a synergy. I want them to know what's going on out there. So I'll talk to them between innings about certain things, but we don't have scouting reports on these 3A players we're playing against. So we can't say, well, this guy hits this and that. You got to learn the whole job. And I'm very glad to hear that his coach let him call pitches, because that gives him a little bit of a leg up in this day and age where college coaches are calling pitches, which is terrible.
Right. That blows me away.
That's terrible. That's a control freak thing right there.
So I wanted to, and I want to pull back the curtain a little bit here and say that I really meant to have Mark on yesterday, but I had made a mistake and I wanted to get you in early, and then they didn't end up taking any pitching, and so that's sort of wanted to talk
about
this. Worked out
better.
But what I'd like to have you do now is I just want to give you the floor, man. We really appreciate you coming on here and chatting with us. So literally anything you want to plug, anything that's going on in the world of baseball. What is it? What do they do? I haven't watched Around the Horn in forever. 5 good minutes. Is that still a thing? Take the time you want. The floor is yours, sir.
I would just say this. We all want to see Major League Baseball, right? We all hope that we see Major League Baseball. Are you guys sure that what we're going to see, if it does come back, is actually going to be Major League Baseball? I mean, the players can't sit together in the dugout. They can't high five. They can't celebrate. They can't do this. And I understand the reason for that. As Matt was just talking about, we've got to maintain our protocols here. But I'm not so sure I want to watch this product. And the owners certainly don't want to watch this product. They're doing everything they can do to not have a season, right? And they just don't want to be blamed for it. So all these people who are the sky is falling, baseball's killing itself. You know what? And I think you pointed this out too, Drew, on Twitter. If there's no baseball this year, guess what? The game's going to survive. We're all going to be okay. It'll come back. It always comes back. You've had 2 straight decades of record growth economically. The owners certainly could absorb a bad year if they wanted to, but they're billionaires for a reason. They don't want to. They're not talking about money they're trying to recruit money they've lost. They're talking about money to recruit money they project to lose. Right? They're going to lose it if they have to pay out these things. They don't want to. I suspect if they end up losing money, they're going to make it up on the back end somehow. That means either fans pay more or players get paid less or something. They're businessmen. But I just think that the premature death of baseball, if they don't do this is a situation nobody was ready for. Nobody had planned for this. Nobody had a blueprint. If it results in not having a baseball season, chalk it up to COVID-19 and let's move on to next year. And there are significant issues, collective bargaining issues for 2021 that don't involve prorated salaries and that nonsense, right? It's a totally different situation.
Right.
When the CBA expires, it's going to be about arbitration eligibility more than anything else. making sure that younger guys get paid sooner because they're correctly not getting paid later anymore. They're correctly not getting paid that contract when they turn 30 anymore for a good reason. Because the analytics show that they're not worth it. The analytics show that Albert Pujols' contract was a disaster. So they're not doing that anymore, and that's good. So I think there's significant issues that Tony Clark and the Baseball Players Union are going to bring up in that regard. But that's separate from this. This is just totally different issues. And people trying to blend the two are off the markets. They're different situations. We'll survive if there's not baseball this year. We'd like to see it. I mean, I think I'd like to see it. Have you guys stayed up and watched South Korean baseball in the middle of the night?
Hell yeah.
Can you see cardboard cutouts of fans in the stands at Coors Field? I'm having trouble visualizing that.
I could get into it. I don't know.
It's something. Yeah.
It's something. It is. But I mean, what are they going to do when somebody wants to dump Gatorade on somebody? You can't do it, right?
No.
And the one that bugs me the most, because as a player in high school I spit all the time. I don't even chew tobacco. I'm a serial spitter. And they're not going to let me spit. I mean, I'd be tossed in the first inning. I would have been out there and spit and boom, you're out of the game. I mean, I could not help myself. I wear a mask when I go out in public. I've spit in my mask 3 times. 3 times.
Wow.
Just
I haven't done that. I'm a spitter too. I'm like, how am I an adult man and I do that? I don't smoke but spitting.
Yeah, I do it all the time, and 3 times in my mask. And it's programmed in, and they're trying to program. And a lot of the things these players do on the field are programmed in, right?
Muscle
high fiving your teammates, and now they're not going to let them do that. And I just, my daughter and I were talking, and she goes, we were driving by Coors Field, and she goes, I said, they're not being. She goes, won't that be weird for the players to play in front of no stands? I said, well, some of them, maybe not. In some ballparks, they're used to it, but certainly here it'll be.
The Marlins will be fine.
Yeah, Marlins. I saw that video the other night of Jose Canseco giving up that home run that bounced off his head. And if you saw the ball bounce, I said, there is like nobody in that picture in the stands. There's nobody there. I don't think they were in Cleveland or something. But
no one.
But yeah, it's going to be weird. It's going to be weird for NBA players. It's going to be weird for NHL players. And if Rob Manfred's right and there is a season, we'll see. I would like to see them close it out with a tournament like the College World Series. Just go down to Arizona, play the spring training sites in November, and play a 16 down to 8 kind of thing, and have a College World Series tournament, 2 14 brackets. The champions play, the winners of the brackets play a 3-game series. How much fun would that be? Make the year memorable. If you're going to do this, make it memorable for good reasons, not for just bad reasons.
I am so in. I am so down.
Wouldn't that be fun?
All right. Well, I'm in. You sold me completely, Mark. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Professional pitcher, professional spitter.
Absolutely.
You can find his work at woodypage.com. Also doing great work on the radio with Michael Clark. I really appreciated your non-sports segment recently. So thank you, Mark.
That was tough to do, but glad we did it.
Very glad. It was important. So thank you so much. We'll see you hopefully down at the ballpark real soon.
All right, I gotta say it. I love Mark Knudsen. I've only talked to him very briefly, once or twice, but oh my gosh, especially if he's telling stories about Charlie O'Brien. I love me some Charlie O'Brien.
Got Charlie O'Brien.
Yeah, he brought the catcher. He brought that goalie mask to MLB. He was the guy.
That's an innovator right there.
Yeah.
You gotta have. I like I said, he's oftentimes my go-to guy when I've got a question about pitching. He's usually in the box. I can go and chat with him, and he's got that unique perspective of having grown up in the altitude, having pitched for the Rockies, pitched for other organizations as well. Probably had his best years with Milwaukee, but we don't talk about that. And spits in his mask. How can you not glean information out of somebody like that? Can we bring in the professor, the math magician, the one and only?
Hello, folks. How are you doing?
The Rockies are on the clock just in time for Andre.
Outstanding, yeah. I've known every pick so far, I guess, aside from Drew Romo. That caught me a little off guard. But still, I'd endorse that pick. This one, I assume, as someone I don't know. Of course, Chris McMahon, I'd prepared ahead of time because we assumed he'd be in the range to be picked at 35. Instead, they steal him at 46. And I was saying in our chat, Sam Weatherly, that's my guy. That's the guy I really
You were
like.
the only one I knew who wanted this guy ahead of time. Give us your Sam Weatherly pitch.
Yeah, no, I just reading the scouting reports and watching, all the different clips on these guys. This Clemson lefty starter really stood out to me because he's got one of the plus sliders, one of the plus breaking pitches, I think, in this entire class. On top of that, as a lefty, he's he sits 91 through 94. He can touch 96. This was his first season really as a starter, and he was starting to, just light things on fire, similar to McMahon. I believe in our Slack, I put that between the two of them in 8 starts this season, or in over 47 innings pitched between McMahon and Weatherly combined, they allowed a total of 5 earned runs. So I don't know. You're the baseball experts, but that sounds pretty good.
Pretty good.
Good. And Weatherly, the only concern, of course, is that he was in the bullpen up to this point. He can control the slider better than where his fastball's out. But what I love is he's got that 6'4" frame. He's already got some strength. He's got premium velocity for a lefty, prototypical frame for a starter, and athleticism. The more I've studied the MLB draft, the more I've really caught on to the fact that you want athletes. That's really what's going to allow you to adjust both long-term in your adjustments, as a minor leaguer, and in game. That athleticism, that those motor skills, that coordination is really a great skill. And Weatherly and McMahon both have that. So I really think they got some really nice, kind of safer college arms with still some intriguing upside. And it's kind of the model we were talking about with the Dodgers and some of the pitchers they targeted at the end of yesterday's show. And I like that the Rockies are tapping into that.
Looks like the Rockies have made their final pick. Go ahead and jump in here again in a minute, Patrick. But the Rockies have made their final pick in the 2020 MLB draft, and it is Jack Blomgren, a shortstop out of Michigan. According to Baseball America, a steady performer with average tools, a solid track record of performance. He was a College World Series all-tournament team 2019. It doesn't look like there's any big elite tools here. A sure-handed shortstop who's going to make all your routine plays, average arm strength and range, but scouts like his workmanlike demeanor. Sure. He's workmanlike. That's always a word they like to throw at you when you don't have elite skills, but you seem to perform okay on the baseball diamond anyway.
He projects to stay at shortstop, it seems like, too. So, you could have another Alan Trejo type player. And, last season when talking to Zach Wilson about Trejo, he's been one of my kind of, prospect darlings, because you don't even see him in the top 30 when you talk about the best prospects in the Rockies system. You don't even see him there, and yet he goes and gets an invite to spring camp and really starts raising some eyebrows. So, Trejo was a guy who, I believe out of San Diego State, he skipped Asheville. So he had played short season ball after he was drafted, immediately skipped, because according to Zach Wilson, he wasn't going to get benefit from that at all. He needed to be challenged offensively. The bat still hasn't caught up with the glove, but he was so advanced defensively that he was going to be able to stick. And now, even in just the past 2 years, he can go ahead and contribute to the Rockies. So, maybe Blomgren is one of those guys, being, a Power 5 school shortstop, played last year behind Carl Kaufman, now his teammate yet again. At the University of Michigan, now at the Rockies. So, maybe what you've got is another version of Jacob Blomgren. It's only a shame that because there's going to be no short season this year, we don't know if he'll make the same jump. If, he'll be challenged to start at Lancaster with Tom Soutteris as their hitting coach, who we just had on earlier, or if he will have to start at Asheville, because that's his first opportunity to play professional ball, because there's going to be no minor leagues this year, even if we have a big league season.
Of course, last year he was still playing in the World Series at this time of the year, the College World Series, that is. That's what he would be doing to continue his development. Unfortunately, that won't be the case. He did rock a 360 average in the 2019 World Series. For a guy that I see a lot of hit grade of 45 on MLB.com, hey, 45 is below average, but a 360 in the College World Series would, not bad with that. As you see, no elite traits necessarily, but as you're saying, he kind of has a profile of a guy that can make it to the majors, at least as a utility infielder, because that defense is going to play up. The power's the one of those 5 tools that's just lacking. But if you can get him to even average, an average bat, maybe this guy has a future.
Yeah, and there's value in that. Again, you need a guy that can play all the positions of the infield. Maybe Baumgart's that guy. Or I believe, as Mark Knudsen said, you can use this guy as a trade chip, right? Even if he doesn't stick around, there could be another organization that says, well, we don't really have somebody at AA or AAA at shortstop, someone that, could just contribute to our big league club. We're rebuilding. You want this reliever, you need a body. It's a win-win situation. So, hey, we locked up Trevor Story for, the next 7-8 years. We don't need any shortstops. Well, you got to still play one, right? And if you're going to draft one to use as a trade chip, maybe Baumgart's that guy. We'll kind of wait and see what happens with him as we go forward.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you're filling out your organization. They've made their big money picks, as we've talked about. They've sort of done their going ahead of slot type of thing. So, also the Rockies have it's funny because you're grading on a different scale here. I bring up the name Pat Valaika, and Rockies fans don't go running to the hills with excitement. But Pat Valaika managed to be a solid ball player who got to AAA, then became a very key player in a successful season for the Rockies, despite also not having any elite skills. Right. That's what these hard workers who play the tough up the middle positions can do for you. So, a Pat Valaika comp might not be, again, exciting to anybody, but look, the Colorado Rockies don't make the 2017 postseason without him. So
that was precisely going to be my point. And at this spot in the 5th round, you're not getting superstars, but if you can get someone to contribute, that has got value. We talked about Doug Million, never reaching the majors, a first-round pick in 1994. Well, Casey Weathers and Matt Harrington, who didn't sign, even when he was drafted and signed, he never made the majors. Those were first-round picks, never made it to the majors. We've talked about, how hard that road is, and Riley Pine is on that road now. First-round pick, has yet to make it to the majors. So if you can get something out of these guys, that is a victory. And Pat Valaika's story, again, we might go back and look at his career WAR, and who knows? His career could be over, right? He might not be able to stick with Baltimore, but he contributed and was a major part, and that's what you hope, because you can't trade draft picks here in MLB other than competitive balance round picks, which is a whole other thing. But ultimately, you can't trade picks. So if you can get some value that impacts your major league team in a real, actual way, that is a success.
Yeah, and I mean, if he's Valaika, this isn't a wasted pick, and it's a high floor guy who has a profile of someone who could contribute to the majors. Also an attractive potential trade asset because everyone needs more, valuable defenders up the middle. And let's face it, it's the first college bat they've signed the entire draft. This is a guy that's going to give him more wiggle room to sign the other dudes. And that's really the priority here, is getting your prep guys locked down, getting some really intriguing college arms locked down. I mean, they went after some big names, some big hitters. These last 2 picks are picks where you can nickel and dime a little more, so you can really make sure that this paper that looks great on paper, or this class that looks great on paper, can be actually the draft class, and you're not missing out on one of these picks in the top 5 rounds because you couldn't sign them.
Right.
Interesting name on this list at 136. Toronto went with Zach Britton. For those of you that are subscribers to DNVR,
Wait, the closer for the Yankees.
Very close. I think he might also be with an H. I'm not sure if he's an H or a K.
I don't know.
But what I had written up was again something we talked about with Jason Hirsch. This idea of who are you going to sign undrafted as a free agent for just $20,000. That's going to be real hard to do. And the idea was, my idea was at least, hey, you know what? You go ahead and you draft Reed Detmers. Maybe his teammate at the University of Louisville, Zach Britton, who's an outfielder, will sign, right? He barely got drafted here in the 5th round, but maybe he'll sign for that $20,000 if you give him an opportunity to go back behind the plate. Was previously a catcher, had caught a handful of games at Louisville, and if that's his passion, if the Rockies say, hey, we're going to give you that opportunity, and we're going to let you work with, according to Dom Nunez, quote, the best in the business, Mark Stripmatter, maybe you could go ahead and build your next Tony Walters, right? Britton, of course, going to Toronto there, and it'll be interesting to see if maybe he does get converted to catcher.
I bet that's what they're doing out there. All right, Professor. We need you to do what professors do. We need you to give us a grade. Sir Patrick D. Lyons has given us a B. I have yet to assign my grade. I've got one up here in the noggin. I'd like to hear what you think. Grade the Colorado Rockies 2020 first-year players draft.
Well, I really like the pitchers they were able to get today. I mean, I think that it was all pending them bringing home some quality college arms, and they brought home 2 of my favorite guys in the class. So it can't be anything else than an A for me. Intrigued by the local kid, the big kiddo from Castle Rock with the big fastball. We'll see how that works out. But no, I just think coming into this, had you told me they can get one of the best prep outfielders and then 2 top 100 college arms who are top 100 prospects in this entire class, but also have really intriguing stuff that can allow them to play up. We're not talking about best case scenario 4th, 5th starters. These guys could be top 3 starters in an MLB rotation. No, I really like what the Rockies were able to do. I think it's an A.
You set me up perfectly. I think I'm right in between the 2 of you here. I'm going with it.
I knew you were going to do that.
You knew I was going to go a B plus as soon as you said. I was in B plus A minus range the whole time. That's right where I think they are. And as Patrick was saying earlier, I think that a lot of it has to do with what they get out of this Drew Romo kid.
Yes.
This is there's a phrase that people have used as a put down for Jeff Bridich. They talk about he thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. This is one of those kinds of moves where you better know what you're doing. You better be the smartest guy in that room to have made this pick. But you're right that they took McMahon in particular at 46 mitigates whatever risk I felt like they took there with Romo. Everything else that played out today makes me that much more confident that they are going to sign both Zach Veen and Drew Romo. And because of that, and because of what Jason Hirsch and Mark Knudsen had to say about Chris McMahon and how quick he could get to the big leagues, and about, I almost realized that the difference between Reed Detmers and Chris McMahon might not be all that big.
Agreed.
I'm going, shoot, they may have gotten the safe pitcher they needed. In addition to these other things I didn't even think were going to be possible, a catcher who could be a legitimate game changer, and maybe the next Cody Bellinger, Christian Yelich, Larry Walker.
Right. I mean, have they come away with the best right-handed pitcher in their organization already? In their farm system?
Let me look at it real quick. I mean, yeah, if I was going to, where do I have ranked? Because guys with MLB, I mean, yeah, if you're not counting Ryan Rollison, would I put him above Rollison? But you said right-handed
Rollison,
pitcher?
of course, lefty, though, right.
So if we're just doing right-handed pitchers,
there's again that kind of belies the problem with
Castellani.
With this draft, and that's why I had to go as low as a B, because they didn't do what they needed to set out to do, was grab starting pitching, and they grabbed the flashy, shiny object there. And said, we got to go after it. And if it's true that he's going to go above slot, not only did you grab the shiny thing that on the highest shelf that you shouldn't have, right? You should have maybe spent conservatively. But not only did that that cost you from getting the conservative pick, but it cost you maybe in the 4th and 5th round where you had to say, hey, will you take this money because we got to give it to somebody else? No? All right, call the second guy, call the third, call the fourth. We'll never know, right? We're not on the inside of that control room to find out what's going on. But, you know, if Veen goes over slot, they might have, you know, been duped to a degree to go off the path which they should have gone, which was Detmers. I mean, you think of it now, and again, you could go back and, you know, replay this entire draft and say, okay, if Detmers goes 1, what do you do after that? Who else is available? Detmers goes 1, you could still grab Romo there at 35, and you know,
and you can still grab McMahon even. If you've got Detmers and McMahon in the system, you've got 2 pitchers, you feel so much better about where this organization is, especially because it's a lefty and a righty. Okay.
That's a B+ if you go ahead and do that, because it was about the need, right? You know, Drew and I had talked, you know, ad nauseum about this thing, about a depth chart and what it looks like, and you know how you just need a bunch of guys at a lot of positions, and you hope a lot of them come to fruition, and it's hard to really gauge it. So in a baseball, you know, sense, you draft like the best player, right? Yes. But for the Colorado Rockies, who, you know, we've seen their prospects, not a lot of starting pitching prospects. They're probably one of a few teams that probably need to take a guy at a certain position. And they did not do that with their first pick, with some real top-notch quality on the board.
True.
Yeah, and I don't know. I guess had it been someone like Max Meyer, maybe even Hancock, I might be a little more caught up on them passing on that. Detmers, you know, I get it. That high floor is very enticing. To me, it's more the Romo pick that gives me pause. And today I've sold myself more on Romo, and at the same time I've been like, well, why not Dylan Dingler? Which I think it comes down to the top catcher on the board when they took Romo was really the Ohio State catcher Dingler, who was picked in the very first pick of round 2. And I know has been getting some like poor man's Joey Bart comparisons in that he's a really super athletic catcher. He hasn't been playing catcher as long, and I think that's part of the question. Romo, on the other hand, he's a guy that Max Preps ranked as the best defender at any position in any age group. Let that sink in for a second. As a catcher, to be able to do that is, I mean, it's just ridiculous. And you really just need him to develop, you know, that power seems to be there already. He's a switch hitter already. You can just get the barrel on there a little more consistently. As I said yesterday on the show, the eyes and plate discipline, I think, will come because he's already a catcher and a brilliant defensive catcher. But yeah, that's really, and yet I can't answer the question of why not Dylan Dingler, who I think maybe would have been, you know, Veen slotted in as the second best prospect in your pipeline. You get Dingler, he's slotted in as the third best prospect in your pipeline, or maybe right there with Rollison, while Romo's going to take a little longer, of course, and we're going to see.
Yeah, I think those are all points. I think if I'm trying to answer the question, why not Dingler, it would simply be he may not remain a catcher, and they've always, you know, said. And I've known this going back for a while. Jeff Bridich, people don't know this. People like to talk about what school he went to. You recall he went to the Harvard Yard,
of course,
and he was a catcher, and that's what he did. And he has always valued defense at that spot. And so, I think that's pretty clearly what happened here. But you're right. In fact, I'm going to have to go through, and I don't know where. That's the crazy thing about the Romo pick. We felt very good about Veen right at the top. If you want to put him under Rodgers, fine. We could debate it, but whatever.
Right.
Where does Drew Romo go on my list of the Rockies' top prospects? And maybe in the top 10, maybe. And I've got you know, Baseball America has Tyler Nevin at 10th on the Rockies' top prospect list. I like Nevin. I like his bat. I've seen what he's been able to do in the big leagues. He's shown some stuff up at the Arizona Fall League, so you just trust that. Where with Drew Romo, you might slot him in here, I could put him right at 11th comfortably right now and see after a year or two in professionals him going up to the top 5, even to the top 2 behind the Zach Veen if he does really well. But as of right now, you're right. If they had taken, Chris McMahon might honestly be higher. I think he would be. I think I would rate Chris McMahon probably right in there. I might put him over Aaron Schunk, who's a player I need to learn more about. Maybe just behind Ryan Valade for Chris McMahon. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, I would actually. Oh, go ahead, Andre.
No, I think the industry would agree with you that McMahon would be ranked ahead of Romo. And yet, is that them playing the board exactly how they should have and getting the better prospect by waiting on him because that was the strength of this draft?
Right.
And maybe, again, and it gets back to Detmers where maybe they didn't feel the need to push because they waited. But, and it brings back a point that Mark Knudsen made of last year it was all college all the time. And it was the pitchers they went with weren't the pedigree that Detmers has, but they were kind of poor man Detmers, right? Like not elite stuff, but pitchability guys like Kaufman. And now instead it was more high upside, toolsy, 2 prep bats, and then college arms. But these are athletic college arms with some heat and some intriguing off stuff as well. So it does almost feel like last year they took care of things and went the safe side. Here they're kind of swinging for the fences in an atypical 5-round draft.
For sure, right? They went 3 college players, 3 high school players, and you only grabbed 2 college pitchers when it seemed like it was lining up for them to have at least 3 college pitchers, and maybe you take 2 high school players max if they're the right guys that you like. And they must like that with Veen and Romo right there at the beginning. But I would actually have the opposite. I think Drew Romo would be rated higher by most prospect pundits over a guy like Chris McMahon. One of the factors, of course, when it comes to doing these ratings is how far a guy is from the majors. So even if a guy like Jonathan Daza, who you might not think is going to be an everyday outfielder, might be a 4th outfielder, well, he's essentially the Rockies' 5th or 6th outfielder, right? He's right there. He's on the cusp where he's going to get some major league at-bats. So you need to make sure you have him on the list somewhere, right? Josh Fuentes was a guy who was overlooked throughout 2018. Much of 2017.
His whole career. You didn't have to pick a year.
Sure.
You could have just left it. Josh Fuentes has been overlooked.
But in regards to prospect rankings, 2017 was when he had his breakout season with Hartford. And then 2018, still the exact same thing. And, by the way, he wins Rookie of the Year MVP in the Pacific Coast League. And now people start putting him on lists because very clearly he's on the doorstep. And so Romo has the disadvantage of being so far back, much further than McMahon. Knudsen said that he could be up, relatively soon in a year and a half, 2 years at best. I think it'll take him slightly longer than that. That being said, Romo's upside I think is so much more higher that there's a lot more that you could possibly project. Now you can go back and look. There's numerous of these rankings. When the Reds took Tyler Stevenson to throw a random name out there back in 2016, he was atop their list, and he's still struggling to make his major league debut. That's what happens with catching prospects, but Drew Romo's upside is so high that I think he would actually slide in, I believe, to 7th, right behind Sam Hilliard. And McMahon, I think, would probably fall behind a guy like Tyler Nevin, who was mentioned. So
interesting, yeah.
I think a lot of that has to do with that projectability of what is a guy's upside. Even if he's far away from that, what is Adele Amador, who was the international signing. Who's the international signing last year, has barely played many games, has yet to even make it over in the States, and he's now a guy that, in a normal 2020 season, he's going to be a top 10 prospect, even though a lot of people probably haven't even seen them with their naked eyes, right? They're just going off of video and things that they've heard, but his upside just projects to be so high that you go, shoot, he's going to go to the top of the list. And he's at the top of the list for the Rockies. When people come knocking on their door and saying, hey, look, you want this player in your outfield, or you need a starting pitcher, or you need a relief pitcher, one of the first names you're going to hear are a lot of the guys that you're going to see in prospect rankings because of that projectability. So Romo's upside is a fair amount higher.
It is.
I think it might be less likely that he hits that than McMahon, but his upside being higher in these rankings, I think he would go, at least 5 spots ahead of a Chris McMahon.
Yeah, interesting. And then the other thing with the college arms and that depth, what's going to happen now where the draft is over and everyone's scrambling to, because there's plenty of top 500 we go to Baseball America's 500. A lot of those dudes haven't been drafted because guess what? There were only so many picks this draft. And college arms are where you're going to see value and where you might be able to get a few steals. And that's going to be really interesting.
According to my math, that would be 340 players not taken. Although Case Williams, actually, let's say he's 5'1".
349.
There we go. No, we're going to do it the other way. But
and he's not one of the only ones who wasn't in those top 500s. It was interesting on the MLB broadcast after the Case Williams pick. O'Dowd, who, as you know, likes to defend every pick, as any former GM would.
I love O'Dowd, and I don't care who knows.
That's right. I do too. I think he's actually kind of great in these settings because he can take his opinion out of it and try to explain why this team thought this way and why they were motivated to make this selection, which is really what's most interesting, I think. But it was almost on cue as they're talking about Case Williams. He's saying, a lot of the time, these Colorado kids, they leave, and then they go to college and they turn out to be really good players because they've polished up and now they're getting that recognition. Colorado kind of jumped the gun to get this guy before. Almost on cue, 3, 4, 5 picks later, RJ Dabovich, a Pueblo kid who was the closer at Arizona State, gets drafted by the Giants. And they were kind of like, those Colorado kids who go to college and do stuff, here's one of them. So there you go. It was kind of cool seeing 2 local kids go almost back to back. And yeah, a little bit of hey, Case Williams, even maybe worst case scenario, can still be a guy that was worthy of a 4th round pick.
It sounds like you should write something up about him called worst case scenario. Go ahead, run with that.
Oh, wow.
That's yours. That's yours.
I appreciate it.
Case
That's yours.
All right, Professor Dre, we appreciate it. We appreciate your insights. Hopefully everyone out there who follows the DNVR Bet Show made a little bit of money from y'all's recommendations. If not, they're just missing out.
I think so. We went 5-3 on the props. So thank you guys for that help. That was very nice.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll catch back up with Dre some other time. Absolutely, for sure. Make sure you're downloading that DraftKings Sportsbook app and you're catching out the DNVR Bets Show. Patrick, final thoughts on the draft?
Yeah, it was exciting. We had some amazing guests, no two ways about it. And sticking to the Rockies here, my thoughts on the draft was that it was wild, and it's gonna take a few days just to break down what happened, and I think it's gonna take years to really break down what went on here with guys who maybe did get a phone call and said, you know what, $1 million is nice, but I'm going to bet on myself to go higher next year. So don't draft me because I'm going to make $2 million next year. There are so many stories that are going to come out of this crazy draft about guys who, maybe a scout even saw a guy down the street at a park hitting balls off of a tee and said, wow, this kid packed on 10 pounds of muscle since his season ended. Let's see if we can get him to sign in the 5th round. And it's going to be amazing. It's an interesting world that we live in right now. This was an interesting draft, and it's one of the fun times in sports where you can dream on players and say, what's going to happen? We don't know yet. We don't know what's gonna happen in the future, but we do know that the Rockies have added 6 new members to their organization. They all have some exciting upside, and it's a good day to be a Rockies fan.
Absolutely. Before we get out of here, it does look like producer Rudo has got a little extra information for us on Blomgren.
I'm just doing a little bit of research. I always wonder about guys when they get called a gamer and things like that. How much are they just talking? How much is that real? Well, I found out last summer when Michigan was playing the one ranked UCLA team at the time, Blomgren actually broke a finger on his glove hand sliding into second base on the top of the fifth, taped it up, stayed in the game, ran the bases, and finished it out. So definitely a tough kid that, going to be a hard out a lot of the time.
Gamer.
It's got that hockey inspiration, right? He's he's Rudo's favorite player right there.
Easy.
Book
it.
Broke his nose.
Blommy.
He could play through the rest of the game. It's just a nose.
Gotta love Blommy.
It's the broken hand. All right. On that note, I want to thank all of our guests. I'm not going to say any names because between yesterday and today, we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 people on, and every single one of them brought something to this show. They brought some unique perspective, some analysis that we weren't going to have without them. And so while I feel a little bit bad about some of the people we had to rush through, and I appreciate everyone out there understanding of us, I cannot thank enough everybody that gave us a bit of their time during this craziness to come on our show, to give us their insights about these players, about the Rockies, about Major League Baseball. I feel like we've just all learned so much in these last 2 days here together. And I have to give a massive shout out to our entire graphics team, Kale, Guy, Eric, our directors behind the scene, our producers, Ali and Rudo. They literally are the best in the business. These guys are killing it out here doing this stuff. I could not be more proud to be a part of this team at DNVR over the last couple of days, over what we've been able to do here. And we're still just getting started. There is so much more to go. We've got articles coming on all of these players, more podcasts we're going to be breaking all of this stuff up into. To catch us on the podcast every single day, Monday through Friday at 3 o'clock here on the DNVR network. Subscribe to the YouTube, the Facebook, the Twitch, the Twitter, all the stuff. Follow on social media, buy the merch. Get yourself a cool hat. Make sure you're following our guy Patrick Lyons again, buddy. Couldn't ask for a better partner to navigate these last couple of days with. This has just been totally fantastic. Everyone out there, all of you have been absolutely awesome. We will continue to be Patrick Lyons and Drew Creasman as well, And until next time, we will see you at the ballpark.